Gates and ready to go. OutKick 360 is underway live in Knoxville at Old City Sports Bar with Spire Sports. It is game day here in Knoxville, Tennessee and Ball State, and college football throughout the evening. Officially, it's back. Happy New Year, college football fans. Alongside Chad Withrow, I'm Jonathan Hutton. Heath Shuler joins us in 20 minutes, plus a jam-packed show throughout with Trey Wallace, Brad Lampley, another VFL will be alongside. Clay Travis a bit later. Blake Bedingfield will join Paul Koharski back in studio in Nashville. That's where PK is currently, in the studios at 6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Chad, it's going to be a great college football kickoff preview show here on OutKick.
Nothing quite like football season, Hutton. And, hey, we've been walking around Knoxville today. They are fired up, ready to go. They just opened the doors here at Old City Sports Bar. They opened at 3 p.m. Eastern for us. We thank them for that. So hope to see some Vols fans, maybe even a few Ball State fans who made the trip down from Muncie, Indiana. I doubt many did that, but if they did, they're more than welcome to come to Old City Sports Bar today. We're going to have a good time.
Paul, it's great in Knoxville. How is it in Nashville?
Very nice, boys. Very nice. Unusual to be sitting alone at the desk, but I will forge on, and I'm jealous that you're in a bar setting, and my bar obviously is outside these doors.
It's gonna be a fun show. I know you got Blake coming by, talk NFL and college scouting with a former head of college scouting for 19 seasons in the NFL. We're going to hit all of the college games and previews throughout today's show, but we'll start with the big headlines. Two of them in the NFL today, starting with Russell Wilson. Massive contract extension, new ownership for the Denver Broncos, and the first thing they do within a couple of weeks is extend Russell Wilson to 5-year contract, $165 million guaranteed for their new franchise, face of the franchise. And he is now locked in long-term for a good portion of the foreseeable, maybe the rest of his career. He's 33 years old. So the total deal, Paul, $245 million. But the key here is the guaranteed. This is not the fully guaranteed money where we thought we may see other quarterbacks cash in just like Deshaun Watson did.
Yeah, we thought Deshaun Watson's deal was going to start a chain where every quarterback was going to demand a fully guaranteed contract. Now, this is two quarterbacks in a row that have not gotten that fully guaranteed contract. Kyler Murray did not get one. He's not of the same caliber, obviously, as Russell Wilson. But now Russell Wilson hasn't gotten one. So I think it's safe to say the trend has not taken off. We do see that's apparently the big issue for Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. He's not his own agent. That's the most complicated quarterback deal out there. So we'll see what happens there. I don't think that deal's getting done, it doesn't sound like, in the next, 11 days, 10 days. And then, contracts like that don't get worked on, generally speaking, particularly if you're your own agent. Yeah. You're not heading for practice up to the owner's office with the briefcase to work on your contract. But and it sounds more like he would go the Kirk Cousins route, where he would work the franchise tag to his benefit, where you're running the risk of an injury getting in the way of your deal. But it looks like the fear owners had and fans had of quarterbacks demanding fully guaranteed contracts because of what Deshaun Watson was able to do when he had 4 or 5 teams really pining for him as he got out of Houston, despite his legal troubles, is not turning into a thing with quarterbacks around the league. I think that's a good thing, personally.
Well, yet. I want to put the word yet on that, because I think age plays a factor in this. Deshaun Watson's 26 years old. Lamar Jackson's 25. And consider who's eligible after this upcoming season. Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. Those are the guys who will demand the fully guaranteed money based on their age and talent, and they're about to get their second contract.
Well, Joe Burrow is not going to get it, Chad, because Cincinnati doesn't have the finances to put that money in escrow, and that's been written about extensively. There was a piece at The Ringer lately about how Joe Burrow's contract's going to affect what they could do with their other players even because of big guarantees. Sorry, Chad.
And the Chargers ownership, too, probably won't be able to do that.
Yeah, I don't think so. And that's what I was going to bring up. It could be about franchise also, because the only reason the Browns did this is because they thought that was the only way to get Deshaun Watson to sign off on living in Cleveland and playing for their team. So they had to come to the table with a guaranteed contract in order to make that happen. I'm curious what teams are either going to pull the trigger on a similar contract in fear that a Cleveland Browns-type organization out there would give them that on the open market, or just a team that says, hey, we haven't been very good in a long time, and we've got this quarterback. We got a chance to have him. We're going to do whatever it takes, so we will match a contract similar to that. I'm curious how much the nature of the franchise sets up with that. To me, the Denver Broncos would not be on the top of the list of a franchise that would need to go over and above in order to lure a quarterback to want to play for them like Cleveland had to.
They've also got a new filthy rich owner, though, who could have put the money in escrow the way Cincinnati and the Chargers probably cannot. I think it's less of an issue for some of these guys. If Joe Burrow looks at what Josh Allen did, if he looks at what Patrick Mahomes did, there's a way to craft a very lucrative, positive contract for yourself without having it fully guaranteed. Plenty of quarterbacks have done plenty well for themselves without that. I think it's more of a badge of honor for Deshaun Watson, or a look at what I was able to do that nobody else has been able to do than it is a I am more fiscally sound than you are, because these guys are damn good, and we know that ultimately they're going to earn all of the money in those contracts. Joe Burrow's not going anywhere, and Justin Herbert's not going anywhere. So it's not a matter of them not Patrick Mahomes isn't going anywhere, but his contract likely gets redone right before he gets to the back end of that contract, and that could be more financially feasible for him, even though his contract right now, right, in the framework of what's happened since, doesn't look so hot.
Yeah, but the guys you're mentioning, other than Watson, didn't live in an era where guaranteed contracts were handed out this way. And a guy got it, and he was going to go 30 straight games nearly without playing, and he's still getting a fully guaranteed deal. So if I'm Burrow or Herbert, I don't care what we saw in Buffalo or Kansas City. I know, based on precedent, and age and talent, where those guys rank with Watson. So I think they'll be leaning into the higher pay raise just to set the mark.
But to get there, you've got to endure those 2 years of tags and all of that. There's a lot of red tape between your contract conversation and getting to a point where you can say, well, screw this, I'll go somewhere where I can get fully guaranteed.
Speaking of contracts and reworking things, the Titans reworked Derrick Henry's contract, made official today. I believe Ian Rappaport, the first to report this, a $2 million raise in total money, which puts him at $14 million this season. That makes him the highest paid running back in the NFL this year. And the way they've divvied this out, they didn't add any extra years to this other than voidable years for cap purposes. And his contract still expires technically after next season. But if he has another big year, he will cash in again, just like he did today. $9 million signing bonus of this $14 million, $4 million base, and he gets a $1 million bonus if he's on the 46-man roster in 11 days when they take on the New York Giants, meaning as soon as that game kicks off, he's making a mill. This is them doing right by their bell cow, their star. And if anyone had any reservations that the Titans were going to decrease the usage of Derrick Henry, I've been preaching it all offseason. They will not use him any less than they did prior to his injury last year.
Yeah, it's a nice gesture to him. He's getting $9 million signing bonus, so he's getting more money sooner. But he's not getting more money, it doesn't look like. And it takes his cap number this year down from 15, I believe, to 9.8. So they're actually saving themselves accounting dollars, which is a good thing for them. They have more contingency room now. They can make a trade later on if they so desire, and then they could push that money forward next year to help themselves out in free agency or with another deal. Jeffrey Simmons is going to get a contract if he doesn't get it in the next 10 days, which there's been no whispers of. but this is favorable for everybody. And we'll see what the clock is on Derrick Henry based on the work he gets this year and the anticipated work. Next year, he's 27 now. At 29, I would feel more danger. But certainly, I think you want to get squeeze every drop out of him the next 2 years here. I anticipate, like you do, that's exactly what their plan will be. And then you consider the tread on the tires. Then I would be more prone to try to do short-term or year by year if you could. And good for Derrick Henry. Get the money up front. You're not getting bigger money, but at least you get get the money up front.
His prior to today, nothing was guaranteed.
Right. Yeah.
The final 2 years of this contract, the guarantees have already been paid out. So he's getting $9 million plus a $2 million raise. And next year's contract will be new. They'll rework it just like they did today.
I didn't have any doubt he was going to get that money, but you're right. It's nicer to have it guaranteed, and it's certainly nicer to have it now. And so he gets to go start earning interest on that, investing it, and they get, like I said, an accounting discount on what the cap implications are of it. So it's a win-win deal here. They have gotten a lot more comfortable with voidable years, which is something they were staunchly against for a long, long time. So the economics of the game have changed in a way where they don't have a problem with it. But here they're pushing, and it doesn't sound big, but $5.4 million into 2024. So just imagine a scenario where he is done after 2 years. $5.4 million isn't a lot for 2024 and what we expect the cap to be, but they now have several guys who have voidable years, and you add all of that up, and there's a decent chunk of change, guys, on 2024. And they used to be staunchly against doing that. Now I guess it's anticipation of the cap being big enough that you're willing to mortgage a little now for then.
It's our college football kickoff preview today on OutKick 360. Games tonight, of course, we're in Knoxville at Old City Sports Bar ahead of Tennessee and Ball State at Neyland Stadium. Chad, later we've got Penn State Purdue. I know you've got a potential upset pick here.
News out right now, and I heard a rumor of this yesterday and couldn't get it confirmed. Harold Landry tore his ACL during practice on Wednesday. Titans down a significant pass rusher. And turn to Rashad Weaver and Ola Adeni. But that front four that keys the Titans' defense down a significant piece. He just got a big free agent contract in the offseason.
That's
not good news for the Titans or Harold Landry.
It sucks for Harold Landry. But they are deep at the position. Paul just rattled off the pass rushers that they have. Weaver has been very consistent. He's coming back from injury. Bud Dupree, the final month of last year, it seemed like he was finally fitting in and feeling good about recovery from his ACL the year prior in Pittsburgh. So it's not great because they just signed Harold Landry to a big contract, but it's at a position where they can sustain and have production. Pitt is known for rushing the passer. We get the backyard brawl today as well. It is back for the first time in 11 years. Pitt in West Virginia later tonight.
Can't wait. It's a shame. It's been 11 years since we've seen this matchup. The two schools are 77 miles apart, Pitt and West Virginia. Game at Pitt tonight. I think this has the makings of a Pitt blowout in this game. It's crazy to see two former USC starting quarterbacks going head-to-head for Pittsburgh and West Virginia in this game with JT Daniels for West Virginia, Keaton Slovis for Pitt. But it's going to be a lot of fun. I know that's where ESPN College Game Day is tonight leading up to that coverage. Fox has the big game we're going to be talking about with Purdue and Penn State. We're here at Old City Sports Bar, and a bunch of Ball State fans just dropped in. I said I didn't know how many made the trip, but about 7 of them just walked in the bar, so there you go.
Fun note about Purdue and Penn State. This is the game that Fox traded to ESPN, or ESPN traded to Fox in exchange for allowing Joe Buck to leave his contract a year early. This is the game they picked up for the ratings.
Wow.
Random, but college football will be dominant tonight on TV. We've got a great show lined up. PK's in Nashville. In about an hour from now, he will be joined by Blake Bedingfield to talk all things NFL and college scouting. That will be a can't-miss segment. When we come back, same exact thing. Heath Shuler will join us, businessman, former congressman, and quarterback. Heath Shuler with us on OutKick 360. It's our college football kickoff preview on the OutKick Network.
What's up, guys? It's Tommy, and if you missed my last show, you may be experiencing some FOMO, so this is what you missed.
It's insane to me that there's this, I don't know if it's stubbornness, pride, hubris, all of the above, that prevents people from just saying, upon further review, as we often hear in sports, we made a bad call and we can overturn this call. This is an embarrassment for the United States, as far as I'm concerned.
How are these people able to function day to day when they get this rabid and this shook over red hats? Red hats, good Lord. The left conveniently forgets that half and likely more of this country likes, voted, and would vote again for Donald Trump. Just because no one has ever thrown a Joe Biden-themed anything, other than maybe a funeral, doesn't mean liberals get free rein to shame the Sweeney family. It's like I talked about in the beginning of the show today. The left is anything but loving and tolerant. They project their hate, their intolerance, their racism, and their bitter BS on us because, quite frankly, they hate themselves, especially the white ones. So go throw a pity party or a justice riot or post a black square and get over yourselves because you're not that special. According to the LA Times, these A-listers, Sylvester Stallone, Dwayne Wade, Kevin Hart, Kim, and Kourtney Kardashian were all cited along with 2,000 others for surpassing 150% of their monthly water budgets at least 4 times since the agency declared a drought emergency at the end of last year. Dwayne Wade being the worst offender, using nearly 500,000 gallons of water in the month of May alone. But don't worry, Wade and his woke wife Gabrielle Union have an explanation. They're having issues with their pool. I've got more hot takes every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday night, and I'll have some final thoughts at 7 p.m. Eastern right here on OutKick.com.
Hey, listen, if you missed my show, don't at me. I've got you covered. Take a look. Peter Doocy, Karine Jean-Pierre, the press secretary, the only press secretary. I want to be the press secretary to the President of the United States. Anybody that knows me knows this to be true. Let's hear this little exchange, if you don't mind.
How is it 2 different things? Somebody unvaccinated comes over on a plane. You say that's not okay. Somebody walks into Texas or Arizona unvaccinated. They're allowed to stay. Why?
But that's not how it works. Like we actually no.
I know that that's not what you guys want to happen, but that is what is happening.
But that's not. It's not like somebody walks over and that's not how.
Exactly what's happening. Thousands of people are walking in a day. Some of them turn themselves over. Some of them are caught. Tens of thousands a week are not. That is what is happening.
Now, I don't know about you, but I want more pressure like that. I want more exposure like that. The queen of the border, Kamala Harris, hasn't even been to the border. I had fun last night watching Serena Williams. Did you happen to catch it? She was wearing diamond, and I don't know what this means. She was wearing diamond-encrusted shoes. She came out in a cape. You know my theory. If you see someone in a cape, follow them. A good time will ensue. I'm telling you. I say it all the time. So Serena comes out wearing all black, has a cape, and I don't know. I thought, well, in listening to John McEnroe before the match, this could be a tough match. The woman that she's playing, a lady named Danka Kovanic, was, according to John McEnroe, pretty mentally tough, and she was. 9 to 11 Eastern Time at OutKick.com.
It's OutKick 360's college football kickoff preview from Old City Sports Bar in Knoxville. Paul is in Nashville at 6th and Peabody. Kickoff tonight is in Knoxville as Tennessee takes on Ball State, among the pack of games that will officially bring in week 1 of the college football season. Heath Shuler is our guest, former Vols quarterback, served 3 terms in the House of Representatives. So we've got quarterback, congressman, businessman, all things, man. Good to see you.
Great to see you guys. So excited about being on the show. I mean, when Brad called me, I said, what do you mean, would I do this show? Of course I'll do this show.
I was talking to Brad Lampley, who's going to join us next, about the show, and I just happened to drop in there. You know, I'd like to get Heath Shuler on the show also, and Brad fires back and says, well, we actually tailgate together, so I'll just bring him by. It will be no problem. I thought, okay, great. I'm also previewing you coming on the show, Heath, and I said, the greatest quarterback to ever wear the number 21 in the history of football that I can think of. And I'm watching
That's a
highlights.
very small number.
I'm watching highlights, though, of you in that number playing at Tennessee. And I'm thinking, Heath, why don't more quarterbacks wear numbers in the 20s? It looked terrific with you on the field in Knoxville. Why the number 21?
Well, I wish I could tell you it was a great story, and it was some wonderful number that I liked, but I moved up in high school from JV to varsity, and that was the only number available. So my high school coach threw me the jersey 21. There was never a question after that. He always gave me 21. And so I never looked back, I show up for National Signing Day. David Cutcliffe shows up at my high school. Wasn't this, a lot of fanfare at that point in time, shows up, and there was the 21 jersey with my number on. So I never escaped it, And then I get to the NFL, and I was like, I'd really like to wear 21. They're like, nah, not happening.
Can't. Can't do it within the rules.
1 to 19. Yep. 1 to 19. So
amazing. And because I'm thinking, that you were pretty heavily recruited. You could have requested a different number. You didn't have to take the number 21 that Cutcliffe handed you.
I never thought about it. I never looked at the number as being something that was, dictated your performance. I remember when I went to Washington, they said, what number you want? And I looked at the equipment manager. I said, just give me one. I really don't care, And so I ended up with 5 at that point in time. And then, went to New Orleans, was 5 to go to the Raiders, and I was 9, and I never cared. I didn't care what number it was, but I kind of partial to the 21, though. I like that. It seems like things went a little better wearing that jersey number.
Hey, it stood out for sure. So did your play. From Bryson City, North Carolina, Chad mentioned heavily recruited. How did you end up at Tennessee ultimately? And you mentioned Cutcliffe's there on signing day.
Yes.
I'm sure that's a big reason why.
It was. I had a great recruiting visit to Alabama at the time, and Gene Stallings was there, and what an incredible gentleman he was, and Woody McCorvey recruited me from the area, and he was like, look, I'm not going to guarantee you anything, but I will guarantee you this: we will win the national championship your sophomore year. Well,
it's exactly
my
what
sophomore
happened.
year, won the national championship.
For those that get confused by all the national championships Alabama's had, 1992 was in fact one of those national titles.
It was, yeah. And so, my dad was a mailman, growing up, and sometimes he had to work on Saturdays. And so there was only one way. We didn't have the money as a family to be able to afford him driving and spending the night or maybe 2 nights in Tuscaloosa. So, an hour and 45 minutes he was here. And, and growing up, Swain County, Bryson City, Western North Carolina, that's Tennessee fans. It's all Tennessee fans there. So it was a great opportunity to kind of feel like I was still playing at home, and my parents and family could come watch me play, not to mention the fans were just incredible.
So that was literally, you remember the conversation with your dad, like, I want you to be able to come see the games. And that was the X factor.
Yeah, that was it. That was a part of it. And, family has to come first, right?
Yeah.
And, and thus the reason I've moved from Asheville, North Carolina, Western North Carolina, to Knoxville because of family. It's my son's here. He's playing ball. I've got my mom lives in town. My dad lives in the state of Tennessee, and we have about 60 other family members. So I moved back. You'd think we all grew up all of us grew up in North Carolina. Now we've all moved to Tennessee.
So I'm getting ready for the interview today, and I'm thinking I need to go back and watch some old Heath Shuler footage at Tennessee, and I watch a game against Louisville in 1993 in early November. Jeff Brom, who's now the head coach of Purdue,
right,
is the quarterback for Louisville. You guys won easily that day. And I'm watching the offense, Heath, with you at quarterback, and I'm thinking some of the things that's being done, it has been done a lot before, and you see it a lot more now, but it seemed unique at the time with how David Cutcliffe and how Philip Fulmer helped design an offense around your skill set. Watching some of your runs in that game and design runs for you, did you feel like the offense was unique at the time?
Well, it really was, because, I mean, we'd go 5 wides. You know, we'd run 5 wide, spread the ball, throw the ball around, and we'd get in the red zone. We'd keep same personnel and go directly to a speed option. And so with having some incredible running backs, a great offensive line, it was really hard to kind of defend us offensively. You know, up until this last year, we had all of the, you know, the Tennessee records, the offensive records, you know, the points in a season, you know, the yardage, and we were as balanced as anyone. We averaged over 200 yards rushing, over 200 yards passing. So we were very balanced, but we utilized some of those same skill sets. But, you know, hats off to David Cutcliffe. I mean, he was like, I was an option guy in high school, liked to throw it around, but, you know, to be honest with you, I was a running back, and they just put me at quarterback. And, you know, it was because I maybe wasn't quite fast enough to be a starting tailback in college football.
But for those listening, when he's discussing 5 wide, I mean, you were 5 wide before teams were going 5 wide, right?
Yeah, there was only the run and shoot offense was the only other, you know, that would go 5 wides. And, you know, we had our running backs were so diverse, and they could catch the ball so well that, you know, put them in the routes. I mean, it was so easy for us. And so, you know, we had sometimes we'd have a hard time stopping the other offenses, but offensively we were super strong at that point in time.
Reminds me of another Tennessee team we'll see tonight.
Yes. Well, and you know, that's what I'm thinking. At the time, it felt innovative, and I know that every coach steals something from coaches before them.
Right.
But then I watched Josh Heupel's offense at Tennessee and the pace with which they play, and I'm thinking, man, Heath Shuler would have been good in this offense too, playing as fast as they do.
I love this offense.
And it's just such quick reads every time. It is snap the ball, and it's maybe 2 or 3 looks most of the time, but you're going fast, and you know that.
It's fast break. If you're a point guard in basketball, you can play quarterback in this type system. Here's what people don't talk about this offense. I truly, there's a lot of skill sets out there. You can throw the ball, you know, you can run the ball, but there's always one thing that separates your better quarterbacks, and that's that mental part of the game. But it's also the mental part of every other player that's playing. If you throw the ball and it's a bad pass or a drop ball or the left tackle whiffs, and you get in the huddle, he's now spent about 35 seconds thinking about how horrible that last play was. So mentally what happens? It's hard to bring back your confidence. But in this offense, you can throw a bad pass, because the next play is happening so quick, you don't have time to dwell upon it. So that mental part of your game, your confidence level stays up more than it would. There's not as much ebb and flow in a fast-paced offense because there's so much mentally to think about. You do not have time to think, oh, my gosh, that was the worst ball I've ever thrown, right? So now you're fast break. You're on to the next one, so you keep that confidence level up.
I've never even thought about the psychological aspect of it, but you're spot on right with that. I also watch it, and I think you mentioned basketball in a fast break. It's really great for team building in that you have to be on the same page.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it is going so fast that everyone must know exactly what's happening. And I know at times it can be very simple with what they're doing, but it also feels like kind of a setup at times. It's going to be a couple quick passes, and then that's setting up the bomb at some point. But being on the same page, receiver, quarterback, you had that at Tennessee, but it's got to be exponentially even more than that when you're snapping the ball this quickly.
It does. You know, and I've got that insight with having a son in the system. I mean, he's like, you know, look, Dad, the most important thing is that you have to be on the same page, because – you know, the routes your routes are going to be dictated by, you know, the coverage in which your defense gives you. So you're going to set down earlier because the backer didn't take his proper depth, right? So you got to be on the same page to be able to get the ball out quicker. You know, a blitz off the edge, then you got to make sure that your outlet pass is prepared, ready, and that happens in a lot of offenses. But with this offense, you don't have time to point and do all the pointing and set who the Mike backer is. You're moving so fast, it's a reaction time. And oftentimes, I think reaction is better for all players rather than having to think through a long, drawn-out process. If this happens, then what I do. If then this happens, then I need to perform a different way. This fast break offense, it's not simple, but it simplifies it simplifies in the fact that you can get the ball out quicker, and you're going to get the ball to the guys that actually can do a lot with it once they touch the ball and get the ball in their hands.
Heath Shuler, our guest on OutKick 360, Heisman runner-up in '93. Do you have a good story from that night?
The best story was, first of all, I got to meet one of my childhood heroes, which was Earl Campbell. And, former Heisman Trophy down in Texas. I mean, to meet Earl Campbell was the great.
He is one of a kind.
He is one of the greatest. And so that was incredible. Ironically enough, O.J. Simpson was the host that night.
Wow.
So that kind of gives you a little wrinkle. So that was a little interesting, later in life. But the odd thing is they put us up there at the Downtown Athletic Club in New York City. Well, I thought it was going to be a nice place. You're only expecting you're in New York City, you're going to get only the best, right? Heisman Trophy. First of all, the seat had a tear in it. They had to put duct tape on it right before we went on. The other thing is the window was broken in our hotel room, and my brother and I were staying in the same room. And we literally had to take the drapes down and stuff it in the window because it was snowing through into the room.
Oh, my gosh.
And we absolutely froze to death that night. I mean, it was the coldest night ever that you could – I mean, there was no heat in the room. There was no nothing. So
it's how also is pre-internet, because I feel like that story today would be huge.
It would have been blown up. Yeah, who could you tell?
Heisman Trophy runner-up catches pneumonia because the hotel window is broken, and, damn the cheap NCAA and the Heisman committee, and – there'd be about 50 think pieces written on it immediately.
Well, I think they went belly up, didn't they, or something like that happened to them? I think they went belly
apparently.
up. Yeah, I can see why.
They may have already been belly up back in 1993.
So did you prepare a speech that night, or did you go thinking that you weren't going to win?
Let's just be honest. I mean, you win the national championship.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're the front runner. I mean, and plus, I mean, I knew I was going to come in either second or third, but I mean, it looked, Yeah, I didn't prepare a speech.
Oh, okay.
No,
I was going to ask you if you still had it.
No.
I wonder if you didn't prepare the speech, if you get a little bit nervous right as they're about to say the name.
I did.
And you're thinking, what if they say my name? I'm not ready.
Yeah. What's that outside chance?
Then what am I going to say?
Yeah, it was. I did have that feeling as I'm sitting there, and I think I went through kind of here's who I'm going to think, and your coaching staff, your parents. I mean, I went through that, but no, I didn't think it was going to happen that night.
Heath, I've always heard that a part in. I want to bring this up to clarify. You declared early after your junior year for the league because you didn't want to play for the expansion teams in Jacksonville or Carolina that were on the horizon. Is that true?
That was a part of it. I mean, let's just be honest. At that point in time, that was kind of life-changing for my family.
Yeah.
And, we couldn't afford the life insurance policy to kind of protect that, that investment, if you would, at that point in time. So, since then, those rules where the college helps those athletes, and it had changed after that. And I think that kind of started the whole thing because, we couldn't afford it. And I didn't want my parents to go ahead, they would have had to, get a second mortgage on their home.
Yeah.
And, I I was like.
For you to play one more year.
For me to play one more year, in order to get a $2 million life insurance policy with Lloyd's of London on, my body if something were to go wrong. So, that to me was at the very top of the list because I did not want my parents to go through it. I had every reason to stay. That was at the top. The other had a little bit to do with that expansion. If you'd looked at all of the things, and, I talked to Steve Young during that time. We had some of those conversations. Those individuals who had gone to those expansion teams and how difficult it was. Look at their record, look at their quarterback statistics, and it was dismal. And so that was awful. But I'm being a North Carolina guy, it was almost enticing that, hey, if things change, I could go play for
Carolina.
Yeah, for the Carolina Panthers.
Heath Shuler with us on OutKick 360. 3 terms in the House of Representatives. I'm going to put the ball on the tee here. Will you set up the rooming situation in D.C.? There was like a house or something.
Oh, my gosh.
And who your roommates were?
Yeah, so, I was the lone Democrat in that house.
You also may be the first Democrat to appear on OutKick's, so congratulations. We're making first here today, boys. Good job.
I kind of feel,
Thank you, by the way.
I was always that guy that I didn't care I didn't care who introduced the policy. When I left Congress, I voted 50% of the time with Democrats, 50% of the time with Republicans. I did not want that. I never intended that to be. But I voted
Which,
for
by the way,
policy.
is how it should be.
That's,
You
here's the way I
should
looked at
vote
it.
with your constituency, and you should vote with what you think, and not along party line. I'm 100% with you.
No party has 100% of it right.
Yeah.
My wife and I don't always agree, but we find compromise and we come together and we do those. So it was great. Zach Wamp, from the state of Tennessee, brought me into to the House there, and Jim DeMint from South Carolina. John Ensign from Nevada at the time. We had a great group of guys that were actually involved, and it was around the National Prayer Breakfast where I chaired that as a co-chair of the National Prayer Breakfast. Kind of one of the great things when it's not your voters, but when your colleagues say, "Hey, we want you to be the chair of the National Prayer Breakfast." To me, that was one of the greatest honors. I love the House. It could not have been a better place for me to spend my time, fellowship with the guys, enjoy the friendship. To me, that was one of the greatest nights. We met on Tuesday nights. They still meet on Tuesday nights, and I get to go back. And it's just, to me, that was a highlight. I missed that a whole lot more than I do a lot of the other things that I was able to see in Washington.
So you're not missing everything, right?
No.
You get to go to the Vol Walk today, and your son will be walking through for the first time.
Yeah.
How cool.
That'll be emotional. To watch him walk the Vol Walk and then come through the tee. I sent him a voice message today. Instead of texting, I wanted him to hear my voice, and I told him, I said, I sent first. I said, do not listen until you're sitting in your locker. Because he's sitting in my, essentially my locker, because we wear the same jersey. So he chose to wear 21, and he wasn't a 21 guy. He chose to, and Coach Heupel threw it to him and says, "Hey, there's only one guy that I know what number as a transfer is getting," and he threw it to him, and he'd already had a conversation. He said, "Do you want to wear your dad's number?" So I told him, how much I love him and how awesome it is, because we held a birthday party here that we snuck in on the stadium. Athletic department let us in. I think he was 6 years old, and his baseball team, we came here, and he got to technically run through the tee like they were thinking coming through the tee, right?
Right.
So I told him, I said, remember that day, and remember how, and he wore my jersey, one of my old jerseys at that point in time. It was all the way down to past his knees. And I just told him, I said, this has been a time of your life. This moment is what you have been dreaming, and take it all in, enjoy every aspect about it. And he understands what it is to run through the tee a whole lot more than I did the first time I ran through the tee.
Because of his experiences and
his
knowing
experience and
your
knowledge.
stories of
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Yes.
And
it's going to mean a lot more to him growing up with you as his dad, for sure.
He knows what it is, and what people, the fans would always ask me my freshman year or something, "Oh, what's it going to be like to run to the tee?" And I was like, I don't know. But once you do it, you never, ever, ever forget that feeling.
Thanks for doing this, Heath.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Awesome. Glad I could join you.
What are you up to nowadays?
So I've got a consulting firm that we do. So we do international and business consulting, government relations, public relations firm, integrated strategy group. So we got that, and then I still do real estate. Real estate's a love for me. So,
it's a Renaissance man.
Always doing the real estate side.
Businessman, congressman, quarterback. Heath Shuler has been our guest. Good to see you, man.
Thank you, brother.
Absolutely.
Great to see you guys.
Appreciate you.
Great having Heath on. Brad Lampley joins us next. Not only did he play college football for Tennessee, he's also the OutKick 360 attorney.
Yes.
And he sits in Heath's chair when we come back
Very
on OutKick
official
360.
business coming up.
What's up, guys? It's Tommy, and if you missed my last show, you may be experiencing some FOMO, so this is what you missed. Over the weekend, I don't know if you saw, but there was a big dust-up, a big debacle involving the wife of Jason Aldean, Brittany Aldean, who she posted a little video saying that she's glad her parents didn't change her gender when she went through a tomboy phase because she loves being a girly girl. Yeah, was it a little bit, pointed? Yeah, it certainly was. But there were a couple other country artists, Cassidy Pope, Maren Morris, and a few others, that were very, very triggered by her statement. And they didn't take the advice of Michelle Obama. They did not go high. They went lower than low, calling Brittany Aldean insurrection Barbie, saying she's disgusting. Did you see all this, and what were your initial thoughts when you saw it go down?
Oh, yeah. I saw that taking place in real time. And I think it's really funny that all of these straight people try and speak for us. First of all, we're not a monolith. Second of all, mutilizing children and medicalizing them and performing permanent procedures on them is not transphobic. That's called being a good person, a sane person.
All right, we all know the madness of the COVID era. Some are really excited to keep bringing back COVID at every turn as often as they possibly can. But Aaron Rodgers pretty much set it up there, saying this was a ridiculous policy. More athletes should have called it out. But what are your thoughts on him saying that, and especially to someone like a Joe Rogan? Is that going to move the needle at all?
I think it is. Look, Aaron Rodgers has always been outspoken. As you said, he's different. He's different in that he's unafraid.
I've got more hot takes every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday night, and you know I'll have some final thoughts at 7 p.m. Eastern right here on OutKick.com.
Hey, listen, if you missed my show, don't at me. I've got you covered. Take a look. He said, yeah, you know, the word in tennis is Serena Williams kind of moved on from tennis. She's moved on to family. She's moved on to her businesses. She's moved on. She's 40 years old. What are you going to do, right? We move on. But here's the deal. I thought early, I didn't think she looked necessarily nervous. I just didn't think she looked very good. Then all of a sudden, boom, Chrissy Everett and McEnroe called it. The most dangerous weapon in the history of women's sports. Her serve got going, and her toughness was on display. And that's what I've always thought about Serena Williams. See, I have a weird thing that I love Serena Williams and I love Lamar Jackson because I think their toughness is off the charts. Like when Serena Williams gets down, you never think she's going to give in. Tennis is a lot about giving in. If you've ever played tennis, you know at some point you got to make a decision. Do I really want to keep fighting this? Or anyway, Serena Williams has never given in. In fact, her emotional outbursts are why I like her even more. I didn't like the fact that she was going to kill the umpire, but we all say things. I certainly said things on the sideline that if they were broadcast wouldn't put me in a very good light, but I've always liked her toughness. And last night I just simply had fun. I thought Marcus Freeman looked as lost as anybody I've ever seen coach a football, basketball, baseball, any game. And I'm listening to Holly Rowe just now, and all she's talking about is motivation. Because when people have no idea what they're talking about, that's what they talk about, motivation. My motivation. You can motivate until you're blue in the face, but what you realize with motivation is motivation doesn't work. Motivation is something when you have nothing to say, you talk about after. The bottom line is you got to figure out Travion, Henderson, C.J. Stroud, those wide receivers, and a very fast defense. I don't think Notre Dame has it. 9 to 11 Eastern time at OutKick.com.
Week 1 of college football is here. It is OutKick 360's college football kickoff preview show in Knoxville at Old City Sports Bar. Ready to go for tonight's game with Tennessee at Ball State. Others we're going to preview later in the show. Trey Wallace will be with us in about 15 minutes from right now from OutKick.com. Brad Lampley with us on set here now, former Vols O-lineman, VFL, and show's attorney. What's up, man?
We go from the Heisman runner up to the guy that came in first place in the Brentwood Steak Cook-Off. I mean, but I got a trophy for mine.
Hey,
I mean, it's in my office. My wife won't let me keep it at home. But
that's a tough championship to win, though, is what I hear.
And one of the judges came up and said, that's the best steak I've ever had. And I said, I know.
That's tough competition.
It's a problem.
Not as tough as representing us in anything, but it's still very, very tough.
Meanwhile, all my partners at Adams and Reese are still back at the office in Nashville, mad that they're having to work and I'm over here. But, hey, this is client development, guys. That's the way it works.
Right.
Brad, I would describe you as a guy who always errs on the side of caution as an attorney with your legal background and the work that you do.
You kind of have to.
Yeah, of course. You've got a son, much like Heath Shuler's got a son playing at the University of Tennessee. You've got a son who's going to be seeing time in games at Tennessee on the offensive line, and Jackson. We're here with Spire Sports today. We've seen NIL blow up in the last year and a half. They're on the cutting edge of what's going on here at Tennessee. As the cautious Brad Lampley attorney, and also maybe even not that, what are your thoughts of all this?
I think NIL is the best thing to happen in college sports in some time. And the people that still argue against it, I don't understand it. The players, there is so much money in this. You think about the Big Ten TV package that's going to happen where every single school is going to get $100 million a year as a revenue distribution. I mean, it's crazy. So the players have got to be able to get some of that. Think back some of the violations we've seen over the years. A player at Georgia that didn't have the money to take his girlfriend out for pizza, so he sold one of his jerseys. Remember, that was like a 6-game suspension. I can't remember who it was.
A.J. Green.
It was A.J. Green. That's right. And so stuff like that, you think about how crazy that is. So I think NIL is a good thing. And, it's obviously you hear about the big money deals and so forth, but what has been a really good thing about it is some of these young men, it just gives them an opportunity to do things and see things that they would not otherwise. I'll give an example. I mean, we had a group of football players from Tennessee this spring. Jackson was one of them. It was probably a handful of players. They went from Dixon to Jackson to Paris in 3 days and worked 3 different football camps for kids across the state. And it was an NIL thing, but at the same time, those players were able to go see those other parts of the state, experience that, and really begin to develop those relationships. And frankly, it meant a lot to the little kids that they were working the camp. So that's the good part about NIL that nobody really talks about. And my prediction is over time, as the market begins to kind of reach a point of equilibrium, we'll start to see, where some of the big deals go away and more of these, the good things is what kind of pops up, I think.
Well, I think you're in such a unique perspective to talk about all this because you also played here at Tennessee and you played with a guy who would have been a gazillionaire in NIL and Peyton Manning at Tennessee in his time here. And a lot of the thought is, and I think it's less about the kids making money off their own name, image, and likeness that people have a problem with. They start pointing to, what if this happens? Yeah. What if someone gets the money and they stop playing hard? Right. What if it causes some problems within the locker room because one guy's making more than the other? What if coaches now feel like they have to give a guy a number of touches because of NIL? All that goes into it also. Yeah. But from what you've seen, do you feel like college football players right now are playing less hard because they're making money in NIL? Do you see problems in the locker room arising from it? What's your perspective on it?
You could eventually see problems in the locker room if I am, the backup defensive end and the guy in front of me is getting a $80,000 a year deal or $100,000 a year deal and I'm outplaying him every single way, and I've got nothing. You could see issues, that kind of thing. But what I do see is this. Kids are going to play hard, and they're going to play much, much harder if they realize that the better they play, they're creating value for themselves. You hear Nick and Kirby talk about that all the time, creating value for themselves. They're not talking about the NFL anymore. They're talking about NIL deals as well. I know that the better I perform, the more opportunities are going to come to me. It's the same reason that Peyton Manning and Tom Brady do all these commercials, and maybe a guy that had a cup of coffee as a punter in the NFL is not doing any commercials for anybody because they've created all that value, and that's just the way it works. Here's the flip side to it that I don't think anybody understands. college kids can do things that are incredibly stupid sometimes. And so what if you go out and, have a few too many and decide to get in a fight or something like that if somebody's running their mouth? Right now, before you would probably say, okay, I might get a couple game suspension, but it's going to be all good. But you do something like that now in the era of NIL, all of a sudden that's going to hit you in your pocketbook, because a company is not going to want to sponsor or support somebody that's doing things like that. So I think, to me, the positives far outweigh all the drawbacks.
Brad Lampley, our guest on OutKick 360. I'm trying to look in the future a bit here. Do you think we get to a point where we have a players' union in college athletics, in college football? Sean Clifford in Penn State, they're discussing it already.
I've been watching
the
that.
TV deals.
Yeah.
I mean, $100 million a season in the Big Ten for every school.
Yeah.
The players don't get any of that.
Right.
Do you think we get to a point where they do?
It would not shock me. I think the SEC will be the last conference to do that, just because that's just, that's the way it's always been. We're not always the cutting edge and things like that. But it wouldn't shock me. I mean, if you'd asked us 5 years ago, would you ever have this thing called NIL or the transfer portal, we'd have said you were crazy.
Right.
So you can see it going in that way. Eventually, I think there's going to be some guardrails put in by Congress and so forth, and we'll see what happens. But, all this really stemmed from that NCAA decision, last year, the Supreme Court decision in the Alston case. And if you haven't read that, you don't have to be a lawyer to read it. It is a fascinating case, and I would encourage anybody to take a look at it, because it kind of explains where we're headed. And to answer your question. And I think the best analogy to use for that case, if you really want to know, is that the NCAA, the Supreme Court basically, let's use pro wrestling jargon for a moment. The NCAA basically got body slammed by the Supreme Court, okay? And it is what it is. Kavanaugh, in his concurrence, came off the top rope. And that's exactly what happened to the NCAA. And that concurrence really has started a chain of events to where we are now. So who knows where we could go? I'm telling John, I think that's imminently possible.
Is it going to be like a Penn State example where it's going to start inside and spread out, where it takes one team to figure out how to pull it off?
It will.
And then if they have that model, then the Big Ten does it, and then it spreads out to all of college sports?
I think you just gave the playbook. I think that's what will happen. Yeah.
And are we close to that happening with a single school, or are we still a ways off from that?
I don't have I followed the Penn State one a little bit. I mean, we're probably still a couple or 3 years away from seeing that there, but where it's going to get real is when that TV money starts to hit for the Big Ten. And then, of course, the SEC never wants to be outdone, so you can see that big money coming along the line with the SEC as well at some point.
Final 60 seconds. Mm-hmm. How excited are you for year 2 of Josh Heupel?
Man, I'm so excited. The culture on this staff and this team is just, and you see it from the kids that come in from other places. Jackson tells me this all the time. Guys in the locker room that have transferred from places like Mississippi State, Nebraska, and Florida go, man, you guys, it's just a different vibe in this locker room. It really is, and you guys play for each other. You love each other. That's what's really cool. I'll tell you what else is cool tonight is going to be watching a guy like Heath Shuler sit there with tears in his eyes when the number 21 with the Shuler jersey runs through the tee, because I still get choked at it when I see number 50 out there. I get chill bumps now just thinking about it, and as a dad, and it'll be really cool seeing him come back and having that experience. So there's just a lot of good things, man. If we can just start out hot and get going, man, this place, the roof is going to come off of it as the season goes along. I can't wait. It's that time of year. You can't beat it.
Lampley's headed to a tailgate, and before that,
and a cigar.
Yeah, smoke them if you got them. Smoke them if you got them today.
Ball State fans already smoking cigars. They're getting them out of the way early before the game.
Hey, man, always a pleasure.
Brother. Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Just getting started.
Don't bill us.
No, don't worry.
This is not a billable hour.
Good.
Coming up, we've got Trey Wallace from OutKick.com on site with us at Old City Sports Bar. We're going to preview the SEC slate that's coming up this weekend for Week 1. And from there, Blake Bedingfield will join PK back in the studio in Nashville. Clay Travis on site here with us in the final hour later in today's program for our college football kickoff preview. Glad you're with us on OutKick 360. Hour number 2 of OutKick 360 and our college football kickoff special underway. Coming up in 20 minutes, Paul Kaharski will be joined in studio by Blake Bedingfield, 19-year NFL scout. Sitting with us right now at Old City Sports Bar, Trey Wallace of OutKick.com. Great to see you, Trey.
It's good to be here, man.
Football is back.
It's a festive atmosphere.
Happy New Year to you with college coverage coming.
Oh, my gosh. It's nonstop from now until February. I was telling some people last night, like, we won't stop this thing until after the title game. And then after the first day of signing, or second signing day.
It feels good, though. Like, it still doesn't quite feel completely real to me walking around today, but once we get in the stadium tonight, it's definitely going to feel real.
I think the biggest thing is once you get into a stadium, no matter what stadium it is, and everything, the pomp circumstance, everything goes off, then you start checking your phones for other scores. That's when you're like, all right, we're in it. It's college football season.
So tonight, Tennessee Ball State. Missouri will also play Louisiana Tech.
Yeah.
And an intriguing matchup there for Louisiana Tech. It's a 20-point spread for Missouri, but for some reason, I think that game's a little closer than that.
You know, I think it reminds me a little bit of what Chad was talking about earlier in the week with the Georgia State-South Carolina game, where it wouldn't surprise me if Louisiana Tech puts up a fight and we're heading into the middle of the third quarter, and this is a close game. Because you got to remember, Missouri's playing out new quarterback, Brady Cook. I know he played a little bit last season, but Louisiana Tech has some depth. So I'm interested to see how this plays out tonight in Como, and we'll see if they can get off to a 1-0 start.
It's also seemingly put up or shut up time for Eli Drinkwitz because he likes to talk.
Yes.
I'm not saying that because of any pressure about the Missouri job and what he's done so far. It's because he won't stop talking about other programs and about his own. So you go out and look bad and lose to La Tech, that's not going to be good for a guy who's talked all offseason.
No, and that's the biggest thing about it is how much he's ran his mouth. And look, he does it in this dorky kind of way, which I kind of appreciate. It is what it is. But tonight, it's one of those nights where you have to go take care of it. It's a Thursday night. You're playing Louisiana Tech. The crowd will be into it for the first half, and they're probably going to go home around 10 o'clock, whenever halftime is. And so you got to be able to stay with it. So it's a big game for Missouri tonight to start off on the right foot because I don't see many wins the rest of the season.
Is there a better game than Florida and Utah in the SEC?
Oh, man.
I mean, Georgia, and we've got some matchups, Georgia, Oregon among them. But
I'm excited to see Bo Nix versus Georgia again.
Okay.
He's 0-3. Does he do something different at Oregon? Can Dan Lanning pull something out defensively with Noah Sewell, linebacker, All-American? Can they find a way to get after Stetson Bennett? And if they can, I think it makes this game interesting for the first half, maybe the third quarter. Look, I think Georgia's more talented. I think we can all agree with that. But there are ways that Dan Lanning is going to game plan for that game on Saturday afternoon at 3:30. We'll be there covering the game. And I think I wouldn't say that Oregon's going to win, but I think Georgia does present an opportunity for Oregon to maybe humble them a little bit. Maybe not come out of the gate with a blowout.
Well, among all of our preview discussion all offseason, and we'll have 5 big questions going into the SEC slate coming up with Clay in hour number 3. We have not asked this question. Is Georgia's defense going to be fine? When you consider how many players are now in the NFL, and the answer is yes. We know the talent is there. The air is rare in Athens. And it's not even a question that's being discussed on what Georgia will look like defensively this year.
That's the crazy part, is how much they lost last year. I remember sitting at that title game last year, looking at that defense, sitting there looking at Jordan Davis, 380 pounds, 6'7". And now I look at the roster, and look, you got Nolan Smith returning. You got Robert Beal, top linebackers, led the team in sacks last year. They've got players. But the biggest thing in my mind is, can they be in Alabama where they just churn the same type of defense out every year? That's what's going to stick out to me the most is, do they have that type of group that's going to come out and be as dominant as last year? I don't think so, because that's going to be really tough. But I do think the defense can lead the way in most series, especially if Stetson, you know what you're getting out of him. But I think the Georgia defense-wise, they do return enough players to be able to help out Kirby, but it's all about just putting them in now.
I think there's going to be a slight depression over the college football world if Georgia blows out Oregon in this game.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be the realization, especially, and we're not going to talk about this game, but if Ohio State blows out Notre Dame the way we expect, and then Alabama's going to look like Alabama against Utah State, whatever, people are going to come back and say, well, it was a fun weekend, but those three teams are so much better than everyone else. And then I look at the Arkansas-Cincinnati game, Trey.
Fun one.
And I think to myself, boy, Luke Fickell has done an amazing job, and he lost a lot of NFL talent. But this is that prove-it program game that was not a one-year fluke, that Cincinnati is a national player year in, year out. If they go in there, and even if they play it razor's edge close in this game, it's going to say a lot about Cincinnati and a big test for Arkansas.
You know, the biggest thing is that game is on the road, like you said, in Fayetteville. And I think that we've seen what Cincinnati can do, but I want to see them go on the road, hang with somebody. Look, KJ Jefferson from Arkansas, I love him. I've got Arkansas finishing second in the SEC West this year. I think their defense is good enough for that. But I look at this game, and it's like, okay, you had so much success last season. Can Cincinnati roll into town and trick Arkansas into thinking, okay, this is not that talented team from last year? You know, maybe they can come in, throw around a little bit on offense. And I think those – look, if you're looking for a game this weekend that could potentially be close, you know, if you're looking at the spread, watch that game. You know, to me, that one kind of stands out to me a little bit, especially Sam Pittman entering another year. How do they play things off this season? And look, when you return Barry Odom as your defensive coordinator and when you return Kendall Briles as your offensive coordinator, that's stability. So that's why I like Arkansas this year, but I do think that's going to be a fun game.
So you had mentioned it, and this is a game I'm going to be watching, Georgia State and South Carolina.
Yeah.
I was going to watch South Carolina in game one because of Spencer Rattler no matter what.
Right.
Because I want to see how much better that offense looks with him there. We know he's more talented than the options they had a year ago, Trey, at quarterback. Yep. But that Georgia State team's pretty good. They should have won a year ago at Auburn. We know what they did here in Knoxville a few years ago against Jeremy Pruitt in year number 2. That is a game to watch, I think. What are your thoughts on that one?
It was crazy. I was in Mexico the time that Georgia State-Tennessee game happened. So when I turned my phone back on, when I got back in the States, I realized I was coming back to Knoxville with them losing.
I wanted to be in Mexico when that
gosh.
game ended. I wanted to be in Poland. I wanted to be
drinking the Mexico water.
I wanted to be in Finland, Iceland, anywhere. China. I would have been anywhere but in the state of Tennessee.
It was crazy. I'm telling you, though, like South Carolina, Spencer Rattler. Don't forget tight end Austin Stogner from Oklahoma. I think this could be a pretty decent football team. 7 wins, somewhere like that. You know, if they knock off somebody and get lucky, maybe 8, but I'm going with 7 wins for them this year. But it's all about Spencer Rattler. Let's see what this kid has. We know everything that happened at Oklahoma. We've read the stories. It's over with. New chapter for him. How can Shane Beamer and that offense really get him out in space, make plays down the field? I think for South Carolina, it's going to be very dependent on him, and that's okay. But I look at that game, and you're right. It's like a circle game. Sean Elliott knows what he's doing. And I think that when you look at Georgia State, the teams that they've hung with over the last couple of years, they're not scared of anybody. They're not scared of going into Columbia and playing. They've done it with Auburn. They've done it with Tennessee. So you look at this game, and I think that's one of those outliers that you kind of circle and you think, okay, maybe we see an upset here. Maybe. We'll see.
Clay's going to come in later and tell us why he thinks Florida is beating Utah Saturday night.
I can't wait to hear that one.
So you're taking Utah, right? Based on that.
Right, but not by a lot. But I think that Utah wins the game.
I'm taking Utah as well. But we will learn a lot about Florida under this new regime based on the way they limped into the offseason down the backstretch of last season with Dan Mullen.
Yeah.
And the way that Dan Mullen's tenure ended, which was a total failure. And now how quickly can they revamp everything in Gainesville?
You know, the biggest thing is about establishing a culture in Gainesville and talking with some folks down there. Like, they're bought in on the Billy Napier thing. Like, you've got players that are, you know, if they're not playing, there's a reason why, because they haven't bought into Billy yet. But I think that when you look at Florida, I really like Anthony Richardson. I do. I think he could be a fun quarterback to watch. My problem is, how are they going to replace some of the guys on defense? How they were going to place Damian Pierce running back?
Yep.
There's a couple different spots that you look at it where you're like, okay, this could be a decent team in October. I don't know if coming right out of the gates against a quarterback like Cameron Rising at Utah, and we've seen him throw the ball around, I just don't know if Florida's ready right now compared to where they could be in a month.
And I think the perception of the Pac-12 is a finesse style. in the trenches.
Yeah.
The SEC perception is you win at the line of scrimmage. Utah wins at the line of scrimmage when
Absolutely.
you watch Whittingham's teams play.
Yeah.
That's what will be on display that I think people will be surprised by. And I've referenced UCLA LSU from a year ago because it stood out to me. I was not expecting UCLA to out-physical the Tigers.
I agree.
I think Utah does that to Florida Saturday.
I just think it could be not a wake-up call because, look, you're rearranging your program in Gainesville. If folks knew everything that was going on behind the scenes with Dan Mullen, that staff, and those players, you'd be even more shocked than you are right now. So I think when you look at it, there's a culture change having to happen, and it reminds me a little bit of Jeremy Pruitt in his last year at Tennessee.
So last year at this time, we were not predicting Dan Mullen was going to be out at Florida.
Right.
Is there a coach right now that you feel like we could be talking about in November in that same situation that's not the head coach at Auburn?
Not Brian Harsin.
Not Harsin.
Eli Drinkwitz is one, and Mike Leach in Mississippi State. If they can't figure something out.
It feels boom or bust.
It
right?
does, because you've got a quarterback that can sling the ball all around. But here's the problem. Mississippi State's losing traction right now to Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. They are the hot team of that state. They are the guys that are getting all the players. They're getting the transfers. You know, you feel like, that's the cool program. And wait a minute, I only got to go 2.5 hours north to play at the cool program? So that's playing in Starkville? I just feel like I know Mike Leach and what he does, and they can win 7 or 8 games. But it feels like to me, if this thing starts tanking, they get 5 wins, something along those lines, or 6, and somebody comes open that is willing to take the job, that's the one I could see that would happen.
Well, let's stick with the Mississippi State theme. In previous week ones where everyone's playing a nobody and you don't have some marquee games, I feel like Memphis-Mississippi State would be a marquee game in the SEC this weekend. But instead, it's something we haven't even talked about yet. And it's on ESPNU at 7:30 on Saturday night. And Mississippi State is a 16-point favorite in this game. Does that say more about Mississippi State or Memphis currently going into this season? Because that's usually a toss-up type game.
I think they're throwing in Will Rogers, and I don't think they know a lot about Memphis. You know, you go back and look at last year, we all remember how that Memphis-Mississippi State game happened, what happened, the penalties, the crazy call right there in the fourth quarter. You know, and that's a game Mississippi State probably should have won, but it had been close anyways. I look at it this year, and I think, okay, Memphis is not just some kind of rollover. They're going to come in and put up a fight. I think it's one of those sneaky games where you're going to be scrolling on your phone Saturday night. You're going to be looking for scores, and you're going to see Memphis within 10 points or 7 points of Mississippi State. You're going to flip that game on, and I think that's something to pay attention to. There's a lot of pressure on Will Rogers to be that guy this year for Mississippi State. And look, you're playing against a team that you lost to last year in controversial style. First game of the season at home. How much pressure is on this squad to get it done? That could be a fun one. Keep an eye on that one.
Is Florida State LSU going to be fun?
I sure hope so. And I Mike Norvell better hope it's fun. Because if they go into bat,
by the way, savvy move by Mike Norvell
right.
in the scheduling. I know this is done in advance, but to put Duquesne in week 0 to get a warm-up to go into the game against LSU.
It's right.
Where LSU and Brian Kelly's coming in blind in game number 1.
And it's going to be, look, it doesn't make a difference where this game's at because it's in the state of Louisiana. So it's in New Orleans, so it's all good. It's going to be a home game. You're going to see Florida State fans travel. My biggest thing is don't let LSU come out and embarrass you with a squad that we don't even know how good is yet with LSU. That's the big thing to me. It's going to be Garrett Nussmeier. It's going to be Jaden Daniels, a quarterback. So the biggest thing that stands out to me is what does LSU do in the passing game? And if they go out there and they embarrass Mike Norvell and Florida State, the temperature rises, it's getting hotter, and you know who they're looking at? They're looking at that coach right now at Jackson State and saying, okay, what do we have to do to potentially give Deion Sanders a chance? And I'm just saying, if you go get beat up on national TV and you're the only game on that night and people are starting to realize this thing is not going to work, there's going to be the rumblings that start to happen.
Trey Wallace has all of your SEC coverage at OutKick.com from tonight on Saturday, Monday, and throughout the season. Joins us weekly here on the show. Good to see you. Thanks for swinging by Old City Sports Bar here with us.
Yeah.
enjoy kickoff tonight. We'll be reading your coverage later tonight at the site.
I look for it. No, guys, you guys have a good time. A lot of people here. This looks like a fun atmosphere. I know it's going to continue following them before the game, and kickoff is 2.5 hours away, and here in Knoxville. But then we got Pittsburgh, West Virginia in the backyard brawl. A lot of stuff going on.
Purdue, Penn State. It's going to be a big night.
That's going to be fun.
Big weekend.
So it'll be good. So
thanks for coming by here and doing this.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate y'all.
Clay Travis will be with us coming up to kick off hour number 3. When we come back, Paul has things covered for us in Nashville. Blake Bedingfield, 19-year NFL scout, will be in studio with him. A lot of news out of Nashville today with what the Titans roster has been doing with Henry's extension, Harold Landry's ACL injury. Josh Gordon has been signed to the practice squad. Plus, with Blake's scouting background, there is a ton on the table leading up to college football season. That is next on OutKick 360.
What's up, guys? It's Tommy, and if you missed my last show, you may be experiencing some FOMO, so this is what you missed.
It's insane to me that there's this, I don't know if it's stubbornness, pride, hubris, all of the above, that prevents people from just saying, upon further review, as we often hear in sports, we made a bad call and we can overturn this call. This is an embarrassment for the United States, as far as I'm concerned.
How are these people able to function day to day when they get this rabid and this shook over red hats? Red hats, good Lord. The left conveniently forgets that half and likely more of this country likes, voted, and would vote again for Donald Trump. Just because no one has ever thrown a Joe Biden-themed anything, other than maybe a funeral, doesn't mean liberals get free rein to shame the Sweeney family. It's like I talked about in the beginning of the show today. The left is anything but loving and tolerant. They project their hate, their intolerance, their racism, and their bitter BS on us because, quite frankly, they hate themselves, especially the white ones. So go throw a pity party or a justice riot or post a black square and get over yourselves because you're not that special. According to the LA Times, these A-listers, Sylvester Stallone, Dwayne Wade, Kevin Hart, Kim, and Kourtney Kardashian were all cited along with 2,000 others for surpassing 150% of their monthly water budgets at least 4 times since the agency declared a drought emergency at the end of last year. Dwayne Wade being the worst offender, using nearly 500,000 gallons of water in the month of May alone. But don't worry, Wade and his woke wife, Gabrielle Union, have an explanation. They're having issues with their pool. I've got more hot takes every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday night, and I'll have some final thoughts at 7 p.m. Eastern right here on OutKick.com.
Hey, listen, if you missed my show, don't at me. I've got you covered. Take a look. Peter Doocy, Karine Jean-Pierre, the press secretary, the only press secretary. I want to be the press secretary to the President of the United States. Anybody that knows me knows this to be true. Let's hear this little exchange, if you don't mind.
How is it 2 different things? Somebody unvaccinated comes over on a plane. You say that's not okay. Somebody walks into Texas or Arizona unvaccinated. They're allowed to stay. Why?
But that's not how it works. Like we actually no.
I know that that's not what you guys want to happen, but that is what is happening.
But that's not. It's not like somebody walks over and that's not how.
Exactly what's happening. Thousands of people are walking in a day. Some of them turn themselves over. Some of them are caught. Tens of thousands a week are not. That is what is happening.
Not about you, but I want more pressure like that. I want more exposure like that. The queen of the border, Kamala Harris, hasn't even been to the border. I had fun last night watching Serena Williams. Did you happen to catch it? She was wearing diamond, and I don't know what this means. She was wearing diamond-encrusted shoes. She came out in a cape. You know my theory. If you see someone in a cape, follow them. A good time will ensue. I'm telling you. I say it all the time. So Serena comes out wearing all black, has a cape, and I don't know. I thought, well, in listening to John McEnroe before the match, this could be a tough match. The woman that she's playing, a lady named Danka Kovanic, was, according to John McEnroe, pretty mentally tough, and she was. 9 to 11 Eastern time at OutKick.com.
Welcome back. OutKick 360 at 6th and Peabody, home of Yeehaw Beers and Old Smoky Moonshine. Pleased to be joined by my good friend Blake Bedingfield, who writes at paulkuharsky.com, a site that you should check out, particularly if you've got an interest in the Tennessee Titans. Blake, how you doing? Appreciate you joining us.
I'm doing great. It's good to be here. It's football season.
Talk some ball. You got a favorite game coming up here in week 1 with week 0 in the rearview mirror?
You know what I'm looking forward to, especially with the college football season starting, is to see the separation between the top teams. And I'm talking about the Alabama and the Ohio States. Right off the bat, you're going to see the Oregon and Georgia. You're going to get to see Ohio State versus Notre Dame. Those other teams outside the top 2, maybe the top 3 with Georgia, you start to see, can they hold their own with some of the better, most talented teams in college football? I think that spacing between the top 3 teams and everybody else is going to be a little bit bigger than people recognize.
These 2 days are kind of our big college football kickoff because 1 means a lot more to us than 0. So we're going to take a little bit of a college slant even on the NFL stuff. Let's start with Kenny Pickett in Pittsburgh. We've tracked closely what he's got going versus Mitch Trubisky there. And they've both been really good through the preseason. What do you envision Mike Tomlin doing with him? How long? It seems like Pickett's going to be the guy out of the gate. How do you imagine that unfolding for a team that hasn't had a quarterback change in a long, long time?
You know, the first thing they did was they built the team around him. They drafted 2 receivers this year, George Pickens, Calvin Austin, to add to the offensive personnel they had 2 years ago with Najee Harris, Freiermuth, the tight end. The only thing that they're lacking is the offensive line. Okay, they still have Deontay Johnson. The offensive personnel around him should be solid from a skill set, but the offensive line is a little bit different now. They're putting some pieces together, but can they protect Pickett? Now, I like him. I think he's a short to intermediate passer where he's at his best. He can stretch the field with his arm strength. He's a good athlete in the pocket. He has a ton of experience in college football, which is outstanding. So the thing is he's ready to play. Okay. Playing his college ball in Pittsburgh, those fans aren't going to be a shock to him. I really like that pick for them. I like the personnel they put around him. I think when you take a quarterback in the first round, you have to put those pieces in place, and they have that with the players that I just mentioned.
What kind of do you think they look towards? Like they've got, I think, a Thursday night game 3 weeks in where they'd have a mini bye, or their bye week, I think, is towards mid-season. You think they think about things like that at this stage, or no?
The best player plays. I mean, I think that's – is he the best player? Trubisky is the next guy. I don't see him as a starter in the league. If he is, he's a short-term starter. And why would you wait? Go with week 1, put your rookie out there, let him play. You put the pieces in place. Like I mentioned, Trubisky's not a difference maker. He's not a player. He is a placeholder for the time until Pickett's ready, or – until they lose a few games, and then they're going to force the young quarterback to play. I
asked you for 3 other rookies coming in, non-quarterbacks, that you are excited to see play. You started with Kayvon Thibodeau with the Giants, who avoided a serious injury, luckily for us all, because we want to see these guys play. What do you anticipate for him in New York, where it's still a slow build?
Pass rushers rush the passer, and they can on the college level, and they can in the NFL. Usually the transition is really good, especially with an athlete like Thibodeau. Thibodeau is an outstanding athlete, elite level type player when you talk about the speed and to be able to bend around the edge, can rush with a little bit of power as well. He was showing that in preseason until he got the injury. That's going to set him back a little bit, but I think that is a player that can be very productive this year. They're building their team. They built it with Evan Neal, the offensive lineman, and then Thibodeau, both first rounders. That was 2 excellent picks in my opinion. You want to build up front, and that's what they did, especially with a little bit to go in terms of the talent from the skill positions.
Chris Olave with the Saints, where they've got some skill position guys, but a quarterback who's a bit of an unknown, and a new coach who is not Sean Payton.
In New Orleans, you have a quarterback that loves to throw downfield. Jameis Winston is a quarterback that likes to throw downfield. Chris Olave is a speed, vertical receiver. That is what he's best at. If you match him up with a Michael Thomas, a Jarvis Landry, You know, you have players that can run those short to intermediate routes, more of the first down chain mover type receivers. Chris Olave's a take the top off the defense type guy. That's why they drafted him. That's what he does. That's what the quarterback likes to do. Now, Winston, even though he likes to throw deep, has not had the accuracy that you want. And he's got to get better with his accuracy downfield. But with a vertical receiver that can run under the ball, it will help that percentage go up a little bit.
Did the Ravens find themselves another classic Baltimore defender in Kyle Hamilton?
I love Kyle Hamilton coming out of Notre Dame. I think he's a versatile piece. You can call him a safety, maybe call him a nickel linebacker. He's going to be that rover that moves all over the defense. And he's a difference maker in terms of size and speed and athleticism and the instincts that he brings to the field. You can match him up with some of these outstanding tight ends. You can match him up man-to-man. You can blitz him off the edge. He's very good in the run game coming down. He also has a speed and athleticism to play from the deep position if he has to play the deep middle. So I really like Kyle Hamilton. I thought he was an outstanding pick for them. Their other first-round pick, the center out of Iowa, fits what they like to do, an athletic center that plays in a run offense, and that's what they do in Baltimore. And I think they had two really good, outstanding first-round picks.
Here in Nashville, the story of the preseason's been Malik Willis, who got 3 preseason game starts and a lot of experience, showed incremental development. Now he goes to running a scout team off a card where growth potential is more limited. He may have, special sessions with Todd Downing and Tim Kelly. Particularly, they do some of that stuff on Friday afternoons with the guy they're looking to accelerate growth. But fast forward to OTAs 2023. How much progress can he make between now and then? And if Ryan Tannehill has a Ryan Tannehill year now, what would you anticipate them looking to do in a year?
Malik Willis has a unique skill set. He's got a good arm strength. He's got outstanding athleticism, feet, escape in the pocket. He really has a natural instinct to avoid pressure in the pocket. The problem is he avoids too quickly. He gets out of the pocket too quickly. He runs. He looks at his one read, and he's gone. You can't survive in the NFL by doing that. And that's one thing that he's going to have to learn. That's an instinctual trait that he has shown over time, is that he wants to run. He's got to stop that. Now, that takes away a little bit of his instincts playing the position, what's kind of made him a successful player on the college level. But he's got to learn to be able to move in the pocket, use that athleticism, but not escape and try to run downfield all the time. You're not going to be able to survive 4 quarters and definitely not 17 weeks by doing that. You look at a Kyler Murray, for example, who's an ultra runner, outstanding athlete, outstanding speed. He wears down as the season goes along because of all the runs he's taking. As he gets older, he's got to continue to progress his game as a passer. He's got a little bit of that, but Malik has to do that now. He has to be able to, in that first year where he's going to be sitting behind an established veteran quarterback, take this time to learn to sit in the pocket and be able to use his eyes, use his athleticism to escape, move in the pocket, and allow receivers to come open.
Blake Bedingfield scouted for the Tennessee Titans for 19 years. The last 6 of those years, he was the director of college scouting, and he now consults, which we don't get to know the intricate details of. He also writes for paulkuharsky.com, a very fine site from what I hear. If somehow Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud does not win the Heisman Trophy this year, who does?
Will Anderson, the outside linebacker, pass rusher from Alabama. He's the best player in college football, hands down. Best player last year, no doubt. This is a dominating pass rusher on the college level that we haven't seen in a long time. Athleticism, skill set-wise, he's very similar to Myles Garrett, probably the best since he's come out. But you're talking about going back a long time from a guy that can actually rush what we like to say speed to power moves. He's got that. He's outstanding. He can rush with speed. He can rush with power. He can turn one rush into another. He can go inside out. He is a double team waiting to happen because no single blocker in college football is going to be able to block him. And he has a relentless motor. But not only is he very good at rushing the passer, he's outstanding at playing the run. Extremely strong versus tight ends. Can't block him with just a tight end. Extremely strong versus tackles. This is a guy that had 17.5 sacks last year, okay? He's probably going to have a great chance of breaking a record which I think is 27 in a single season, way before they kept records. This was Derek Thomas and Teddy Bruschi. But, this is a guy that has outstanding numbers, but he is going to continue to rush the passer. They have another good outside linebacker on the other side, Dallas Turner, that also has to be double-teamed at times. So Will Anderson is outstanding. He is going to be a dominating force in college football. I don't care if you block him with one or you block him in two, and I think he's the Heisman Trophy winner if those other two don't. You
also really like TreVeyon Henderson at Ohio State.
TreVeyon Henderson is the total package as a runner. He's a little bit of Jonathan Taylor. He's got a little bit of that. He's got great speed. He's got outstanding feet. He's got that contact balance. When he gets hit, he continues to move. But he has got a range of skills. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. This is a guy that almost rushed for 7 yards per carry last year, and he split time with some upperclassmen. So he's another one that has a chance to be in that Heisman run. We're just talking about 4 players, and they just happen to come from 2 schools.
Yeah. So college football's future. Josh Pate, who's a friend of the show, I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He had a really good segment that he put out the other day about how everybody's wild about the idea of expanded playoffs, and it'll be good initially. But then ultimately what happens is a game of consequence for Alabama, like the A&M game last year, won't be of any consequence for Alabama if there are 8 or 12 playoff teams down the road. And those moments in the regular season will get pushed from Alabama and A&M significance down to the 8th team, down to the 12th team, and college football stuff will have less meaning for those top teams who we already don't like and resent because they have an easy path in our eyes to the Final Four. And ultimately, it won't be good for college football. I'd not heard that phrased that way. The idea that scarcity is actually good. What do you think about that idea ultimately? That less actually makes things more compelling for college football?
See, I actually think the opposite. I think the more teams in a playoff will actually create players that can transfer, okay? They want to be on the big stage. They do. The running back that's going to Alabama this year went to Georgia Tech. He wants to be on the big stage. He wants to win ball games. He wants to be in a national championship type setting. He's also probably going to be a high draft pick after this year too, playing for that team. But if you have 12 teams in a playoff setting, you have more opportunities to be on that big stage, to give that opportunity to play maybe 2 more games or 3 more games at the end of your college career, to be in the limelight, to enhance your ability not only to make money in the NIL, but also in the NFL draft. So I actually think the more teams actually will create a better environment for college football. Right now you have the haves and the have-nots, and the haves are very few.
And so guys won't leave as quickly. You could stay at a school with a chance to win, which limits Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State's ability to get so many good transfers.
No question about it, because right now it's just free agency in college football. You can go pick up a player that you've seen on film, playing on a college level, and you can plug him into a spot. Maybe you lost a first-round pick the year before to the NFL draft, and now you can put him in on your college team instead of waiting for a freshman to develop or a sophomore that maybe that's not ready. Now you can get a junior or a rising senior or graduate player that has played a lot of football on the college level, that he can come in and fill a spot on a great team already. That's what makes those teams even better, is when you can bring in a transfer and you put him around other great players, and you create not only the competition among the young players, but you're putting him in a position to play right now with outstanding players. Not only can it up his game, but it can also make the team a lot better, because you're not relying on that young person to make mental mistakes.
I just had a column post at OutKick.com about third-string quarterbacks, about practice squad quarterbacks. 17 teams simply took the guy that they cut to get down to 53 and put him on their practice squad, which I know is what teams are doing with most of their 16 guys, are guys that were with them in camp. They're familiar with them. They like them. They don't have room for them on their 53. They sign them to their practice squad. My argument is, for those 17 teams, they're sticking with a familiar guy who's not very good. And, isn't there an alternative? You can get him up to snuff. You're not going to need him to do much unless disaster strikes. He's going to be reading your scout team card. Probably not even that, because the second stringer is going to be doing that. Isn't there a likelihood that somebody else's guy is better than your guy? And how intensely is that scouted? Or are teams just content with familiarity? And is that the most important quality of that guy?
It is scouted. The pro scouts are scouting those players. But what happens is you get that familiar player. Let's just take, you talked about Malik Willis. Malik Willis is going to take the coach's attention. Ryan Tannehill, then Malik Willis, the third-string quarterback, that practice squad guy, which is now Logan Woodside, who they have a familiarity with. He's not going to get the attention from the coaches because he doesn't need it, because what his ability, his ceiling is, he's already reached. Okay, but he's a guy that can come in and be your number two. If something happens to one of the first two, he can come in without much work from the coaches. You hate to say that, but there is the development's going to be for the Malik Willises of the world, because they want to get him ready for 2023 or maybe this year if there's an injury situation with the number one. But around the league, playing time matters so much. And I'm not talking about preseason playing time. I'm talking about, you look at a P.J. Walker that plays with the Carolina Panthers. He was a backup his entire career with the Indianapolis Colts. Ended up going on the practice squad, eventually getting cut. His salary was going to be too high for a team to take a chance on with a guy that many years in the league, but hadn't really played. He goes to the XFL. He plays, has an outstanding year before the league got shut down because of COVID. He goes in and gets a backup quarterback job with the Carolina Panthers, and he's still there making seven figures. That's what he needed. That's what the NFL is missing. They miss that minor league system. They miss the other leagues to develop a quarterback in the game, being the starter week one. He's the guy, and going from that college to pro. And that's such an important transition, but a lot of these quarterbacks never get that chance. Unless there's an injury, unless there's something that happens, they really never get that opportunity, because outside of preseason game, which they may get a quarter or two, or they're playing against other backup level players, or they're putting in such a vanilla type offense, they really don't get to show their skills enough, especially to entice the rest of the league to sign them. So that's why teams go with comfort, and until they're forced into a situation, there hasn't been trades for those type of quarterbacks in a long, long time, or players that are brought in that have that really outstanding ability, upside, that type of thing.
Two guys got claimed. Kellen Mond by Cleveland. Now I'm going to forget the second one. And I can't believe I'm applauding the two teams that make those claims. But I actually did. I said, hey, I give you credit for going and doing something. Philadelphia claimed Ian Book. I'm not excited about Ian Book, but I say, hey, at least you're going and getting somebody different and thinking that you see something better than Carson Strong, or better than the guy that you had, an incumbent. Let's go through the AFC West. Go ahead. You had a point on that?
I think those two moves kind of are perfect for those teams. If you look at an Ian Book, he's similar to a Jalen Hurts. So a player that he's a very smart kid, coming from Notre Dame. He's an athletic player, likes to run around, can avoid in the pocket, escape, good instincts, kind of has those intangible qualities that you like. A lot of the same things you say about Jalen Hurts. So maybe they develop him as that backup without having to change the offense very much. Kellen Mond, if you look at him, he was a high draft choice. I thought when we spoke about it years ago, way too high for where he was taken. He was cut. New regime coming in Minnesota. He really didn't fit what they want to do. But if you look at the quarterbacks they have, Jacoby Brissett, Deshaun Watson, eventually, you have a very similar player. Kind of tall, athletic player in the pocket, moves around well. And maybe they develop him. Maybe they don't. If they don't really worry about it at this point, because they do have Deshaun Watson coming back in week 11 or 12.
Let's go through the AFC West, which everybody agrees is the most stacked division that we've seen in some time, with four pretty damn good quarterbacks. How do you stack it top to bottom? How many teams do you see in the playoffs, and who's out?
I love the Chargers this year. I love what they did from a personnel standpoint. When you bring in Khalil Mack, you bring in J.C. Jackson, you drafted Zion from the guard from Boston College. You brought in some players that can really help this team right now. And they're players that are hungry, that want to win. And, J.C. Jackson's had some success, but from a winning standpoint from the team. But Khalil Mack, this is a player that line him up on the other side of Bosa. They've got a nice two-headed pass rush, which they really didn't have last year. But anyway, I love the Chargers quarterback's development. The receivers are in place. They're building that offensive line through the draft. I really like what they're doing. The head coach has to be a little bit more stable this year. Play with that talent, not trying to do things that are a little crazy. I do love what Denver did, but I think Kansas City, you can't dismiss Patrick Mahomes. Now, are they going to miss Tyreek Hill? Without a doubt. You cannot replace Tyreek Hill with a Juju Smith-Schuster or Valdez-Scantling. Those are not replaceable players for a dynamic player like Tyreek Hill. So they do take a step back there.
And you have him as a wild card.
I do have him as a wild card.
I do too.
Patrick Mahomes is too gifted, too talented. He can make something out of nothing, and a lot of times, not that Valdez-Scantling and those guys are nothing. They're just not the same level of elite player that Tyreek Hill is. Next will be Denver Broncos. You add the quarterback. Russell Wilson has one with less. He's got more in Denver right now. New coaching staff, that type of thing. So we'll see how that works out. But you get an established veteran quarterback. If you don't have a quarterback, you don't win a lot of times in this league. And unless your division is awful, you don't win. And this is a very good division. I think the fourth team is the Raiders, and I think they're out. They've lost so much talent this year. They brought in Devontae Adams. They brought in Chandler Jones. Those are two good pieces. But they have cut so many players, and I'm talking about young players. Talked about Alex Leatherwood, the offensive lineman from Alabama that was drafted in the first round last year. They cut him. Do they have a backup that's better than Alex Leatherwood? I would argue no. But they cut him because he was a bust for someone else. But that doesn't mean you get rid of talented players. They have gotten rid of too many talented players, and they really didn't have a lot of talent on that team in the first place. So I think they're going to take that step back and be out of the playoffs.
But you've got the other three in.
I do have the other three, and I think the Broncos are on that border. The AFC is good this year. You know, you're talking about the Colts, and it depends on who wins that AFC South. But I have the Titans probably winning the AFC South, with the Colts being the second. But the Colts are probably a better team right now. It depends on Matt Ryan.
What do you make of Josh Gordon? The Titans have signed him to the practice squad. He had a year early where he led the league in pass receiving. Obviously, he's had difficulties with suspension. He's been suspended 6 times, 2 full seasons. He's only been available 75 of 161 games, 46.5%. But they need help at wide receiver, and I don't think they're testing for marijuana anymore, so that shouldn't be a factor for him. He's 31. But he doesn't have a lot of wear and tear on him, and I would think he's better than Des Fitzpatrick, who's probably next in line.
I think 31 is more of a factor than the marijuana. It depends on how severe the marijuana is. But he's had a lot of issues. This goes back all the way to Baylor. I mean, he had that issue back then. But the one thing he had a lot of God-given ability. He is a well-built guy, looks the part, can run. He's just getting a little bit older, and he hasn't played a lot of football. What can they get out of him? Maybe they try to get something out of him. You're not going to see a starter. You're not going to see a star-type player, but you're going to see maybe a player that can, in an injury-type situation, and come in, fill in for a game or two, because he does have he still has a size. He still has athleticism. I'm sure he can still run. Haven't seen him run outside of last year. I'm sure that's still something there. The off-the-field issues, he had more than just the marijuana. I think he had some other issues with alcohol and that type of thing. I mean, so he's had a lot of problems. Hopefully those are over and he can get his life settled, but they've said that 6 times before.
Yeah, 32 catches in his last 2 seasons, so it's not like teams have been turning to him for production. Finally, John Robinson yesterday, Titans general manager, he had a phenomenal draft in 2019. In 2020, he did not follow that up successfully. They just cut 2 guys from that draft. He's left with one of the 6 players from that draft, Christian Fulton, who is their best cornerback. And yesterday he was asked about that, and he raised COVID as an issue. He said, I wasn't able to do the things that I typically am able to do, and that he felt out of sorts about it. He usually is a pretty stand-up guy about taking fault when he misses. He stood up and raised his hand for Isaiah Wilson, who was the biggest failure of that class and everything. I didn't like the sound of it, Blake. I don't want to pit you against him, but Chris Ballard, his main rival in the division, found 4 starters and 2 backups out of that same draft with the same limitations. What did you think when you heard Robinson say what he did?
There are no excuses for making mistakes, especially that many in one draft. I mean, that can really set you back. You've got 1 starter, 1 player out of that entire draft. That can set you back. What happens is when you draft an Isaiah Wilson, you end up, if you have a mistake like he was, you end up having to redraft that mistake. And they
did with Dylan
Radins, and he is now not filling a spot. Other players are now playing over him. So now you've created two situations where it hasn't worked out. Plus, you've gone into free agency and continue to purchase the Kendall Lambs or trade for a Dennis Daly. You keep trying to find that replacement off that mistake. Now, getting back to your comment of COVID and all that, scouts scout. Okay, what they do is they have contacts at these universities. They have the ability to find out the background information. If you're a good scout, you can find out that information. If you have contacts, if you are trusted within those universities, within those organizations. And then it comes back to evaluation. You know, if you're just looking at Isaiah Wilson alone, he was a one-position player that had a lot of issues, not only the mental issues, but he had some other issues. But he was a one position. If he was going to fail at right tackle, there really was nowhere for him else to go, and that's a first-round pick. Darrington Evans comes from Appalachian State, straight-line speed guy, didn't work out, hamstring injuries. You know, Laurel Murchison, I think Laurel was a player that they brought in as kind of a depth player, and he kind of filled that role for 2 years, and then he was kind of gone. The one that is a late-round pick, Cole McDonald, was just awful on film. Yeah. He was awful on film. If you're watching film at any point, and you see the throwing motion, you see the lack of accuracy, you see a problem there, and he didn't even make it into training camp and has yet to resurface anywhere else in football. So,
Blake Bedingfield, former Titan scout, really appreciate it. Great stuff. You're listening or watching OutKick 360 on the OutKick Network.
What's up, guys? It's Tommy, and if you missed my last show, you may be experiencing some FOMO, so this is what you missed. Over the weekend, I don't know if you saw, but there was a big dust-up, a big debacle involving the wife of Jason Aldean, Brittany Aldean, who she posted, a little video saying that she's glad her parents didn't change her gender when she went through a tomboy phase because she loves being a girly girl. Yeah, was it a little bit, pointed? Yeah, it certainly was. But there were a couple other country artists, Cassidy Pope, Maren Morris, and a few others that were very, very triggered by her statement. And they didn't take the advice of Michelle Obama. They did not go high. They went lower than low, calling Brittany Aldean Insurrection Barbie, saying she's disgusting. Did you see all this, and what were your initial thoughts when you saw it go down?
Oh, yeah. I saw that taking place in real time. And I think it's really funny that all of these straight people try and speak for us. First of all, we're not a monolith. Second of all, mutilizing children and medicalizing them and performing permanent procedures on them is not transphobic. That's called being a good person, a sane person.
All right, we all know the madness of the COVID era. Some are really excited to keep bringing back COVID at every turn as often as they possibly can. But Aaron Rodgers pretty much set it up there, saying this was a ridiculous policy. More athletes should have called it out. But what are your thoughts on him saying that, and especially to someone like a Joe Rogan? Is that going to move the needle at all?
I think it is. Look, Aaron Rodgers has always been outspoken. As you said, he's different. He's different in that he's unafraid.
I've got more hot takes every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday night, and I'll have some final thoughts at 7 p.m. Eastern right here on OutKick.com.
Hey, listen, if you missed my show, don't at me. I've got you covered. Take a look. He said, the word in tennis is Serena Williams kind of moved on from tennis. She's moved on to family. She's moved on to her businesses. She's moved on. She's 40 years old. What are you going to do, right? We move on. But here's the deal. I thought early, I didn't think she looked necessarily nervous. I just didn't think she looked very good. Then all of a sudden, boom, Chrissy Everett and McEnroe called it. The most dangerous weapon in the history of women's sports. Her serve got going, and her toughness was on display. And that's what I've always thought about Serena Williams. See, I have a weird thing that I love Serena Williams and I love Lamar Jackson because I think their toughness is off the charts. Like when Serena Williams gets down, you never think she's going to give in. Tennis is a lot about giving in. If you've ever played tennis, at some point you got to make a decision. Do I really want to keep fighting this? Anyway, Serena Williams has never given in. In fact, her emotional outbursts are why I like her even more. I didn't like the fact that she was going to kill the umpire, but we all say things. I certainly said things on the sideline that if they were broadcast wouldn't put me in a very good light, but I've always liked her toughness. And last night I just simply had fun. I thought Marcus Freeman looked as lost as anybody I've ever seen coach a football, basketball, baseball, any game. And I'm listening to Holly Rowe just now, and all she's talking about is motivation. Because when people have no idea what they're talking about, that's what they talk about, motivation. My motivation. You can motivate until you're blue in the face, but what you realize with motivation is motivation doesn't work. Motivation is something when you have nothing to say, you talk about after. The bottom line is you got to figure out Travion, Henderson, C.J. Stroud, those wide receivers, and a very fast defense. I don't think Notre Dame has it. 9 to 11 Eastern time at OutKick.com.
Welcome back to Old City Sports Bar in Knoxville with Chad Withrow. I'm Jonathan Hutton. Great chat there from Koharski with Blake Bedingfield. Coming up, Clay Travis will be here with us as we kick off hour number 3 of all things college football. Chad, give us the DraftKings parlay that you're playing tonight.
Parlay tonight, game that we're going to watch here. I'm taking Ball State to cover against Tennessee. I got it at 36.5 points.
That's what
Tennessee
it is currently.
beat Bowling Green a year ago, 38-6. I could see a similar final score, but with Tennessee scoring more points and Ball State scoring more points. So I think it's more a 32, 35-point game. So I'm going to take Ball State to cover. I've got Purdue money line. I know we're going to talk to Clay. He likes Purdue in this game also. I'm taking Purdue as a 3.5-point underdog on the money line at home, and give me the Pitt Panthers. In the battle of former Southern Cal quarterbacks, I'm going to take Keaton Slovis and Pitt to cover 7.5 against West Virginia.
The Panthers had 280 quarterback pressures a year ago. That's 20 a game. And they are going to get after JT Daniels.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of this game. I'm more sure about what Pitt is bringing back as opposed to West Virginia.
Clay Travis will be with us when we come back, and we talk all things SEC football on OutKick 360. Hang with us. It is the college football kickoff preview on OutKick 360 with Chad Withrow. I'm Jonathan Hutton, Paul Koharski back in Nashville. OutKick founder Clay Travis joins us at Old City Sports Bar ahead of Tennessee and Ball State tonight. Week 1 is officially here, and we can finally say football is back. Clay, good to see you, man.
Yeah, I'm excited for the start of college football season, and there's a lot of good Thursday night football games going on. And I'm pretty excited in general to see what year 2 with Hendon Hooker is going to be capable of. I think you look at what's going on with Pitt and West Virginia. That's an all-time rivalry game, hasn't been played in a decade. And then,
how is that possible?
I mean, it's probably political as much as anything else. Oftentimes these big rivalry games get canceled for political-related reasons. And then I think you got a good Big Ten game between Purdue and Penn State, which is two teams that theoretically believe that they have, momentum on their side, but it's a 3.5-point game. Purdue, if they got the win, would be ecstatic, and same thing would happen for Penn State.
Penn State has won over Purdue 8 straight times. The last time they played was 2019, and both of them, Sean Clifford and Aiden O'Connell, feel like they've been college quarterbacks for like 10 years. I think they're both 6-year seniors. It's a fascinating matchup because, to me, we should be seeing more from Penn State, right? Like James Franklin, Nittany Lions.
Yeah, I think
Chad's big on Purdue tonight.
He's making a lot of money. Yeah, that's for sure.
I think the challenge has been, first of all, the COVID year. I think for a lot of teams, you just kind of throw in the dumpster, right? Like especially in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Because they weren't going to play, then they were going to play, then they had restrictions about what they could do. I mean, the Big Ten completely bungled COVID.
Yeah.
And so as you break down that year, and then last year, if I remember correctly, didn't Penn State get off to a super hot start?
I think they were 5-0 at one. They were 5-0 and lost at Iowa.
And then they
that's where the wheels fell off.
And then they fell apart from there. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty about Sean Clifford, what he's going to be capable of, and how exactly that's all going to be shaking out is I think going to be super intriguing to watch. And I just feel like there's really good optimism in general for everybody out there to be ready to roll and be excited.
Clay, what's it like being on a show with two guys that know college football as opposed to every day you're on a show with someone who knows nothing about sports? I'm just curious if it's refreshing to talk to guys on air that know sports, because typically when you're talking sports, it's just you talking sports and OutKick the show.
Has Buck
right?
been to more than one game after last year's game?
No, we're at Austin next week for the Big Noon Kickoff, which I'm optimistic about. I think that's going to be a really fun environment in Austin, and Buck's going to be there. So I took him last year to Ole Miss, Alabama. I mean, this is just kind of a weird dynamic. So I just came from doing the Clay and Buck show, and then I'm going to go watch for like 45 minutes, and then I think I'm on as the lead on Tucker. So I'm going to have to duck out of the Tennessee football game against Ball State to go do the open for Tucker Carlson show, wearing a T-shirt and hanging out there. And that in and of itself is going to be wacky. And then you think, there's a lot of people who watch college football games. There'll be 100,000 people in Neyland, whatever it is, and 4 million people will be watching Tucker Carlson. So Tucker
give a score update.
Tucker probably will have more people watching him on Fox News than will watch any college football game tonight for the opening Thursday night.
How many people watching that show would know Tennessee's playing at that time?
I think
if they see you with a shirt, I'm just thinking, are people going to know, he's at the Tennessee Ball State game?
Well, I mean, I told him that I'm going to be dropping, assuming that Tucker will reference it. But last year, I ducked out of the Tennessee Bowling Green game to do Hannity. But I went and had them buy a jacket and a button-down for me. And this time, I'm going to be just sitting there in an orange OutKick T-shirt.
We have no PAs like a year ago.
Well, I mean, the whole process, I'm going to be on the road. I think I was looking at the calendar, basically. This is a crazy season, but you go all the way on the road, basically, between now and Christmas. Take a little break, and then Fox has got the Super Bowl. I mean, you think about what Fox has this fall. Fox has got the World Cup. Fox has the Super Bowl. Fox has the World Series. Certainly the NFC on that program. And so you start to break down all the different craziness that they've got going on. And then you also toss in that we're going to have midterm elections. And this is going to be a pretty wild, I think, fall all over the country.
I mean, you've got for Fox, you've got possibly the most viewed weekend of sports in the history of sports television coming up. It's U.S. and England on Friday, on Black Friday, in the World Cup.
First, the Thursday Cowboy Thanksgiving Day game.
Thanksgiving
then you
Day
go Friday
game.
with the World Cup U.S.-England.
And then Saturday's Michigan-Ohio State.
That's right. And then Sunday is the NFL
But
on
Sunday's
Fox.
some huge NFL game.
Yeah, it'll be a monster game.
It's one of the biggest of the year.
It probably will be the most watched 4 days of sports in years. And you talk about the difference of college football, NFL, World Cup, and how many different moving parts are involved there. I'm excited. We just set the all-time record for readership at OutKick. And we've been focused right now on getting the website. We've hired so many new people, and Gary Schreier's doing a really good job with the website. So I think we're going to be firing on all cylinders for the website. And then next year, we're going to get the whole 12 hours of programming daily officially rolling. We get all the kinks worked out on the video. But so there's just a lot of things to be excited about, I think. I mean, I think OutKick is 60 employees or something now, which is a lot. When you think about a decade ago, I was starting. I mean, you were with me, I think, in the we were sharing a hotel room.
Or in Hoover,
in Hoover.
The old shared hotel room days.
Yeah. And
we all want to get back to those days so quickly.
It wasn't like it was a really expensive hotel room. I mean, that's probably $100 hotel room.
It was a microtel, I think.
And they put us, in a double room there. But that's when I launched OutKick in 2011. And I remember going back a long time ago when I started writing online. I was like, man, I wish one day we could have 100 readers. I wish we could have 1,000 readers. And we did just shy of 10 million unique readers at OutKick on the website, and that doesn't count, sundry videos. I mean, Tommy is. Some of her Instagram videos
the numbers are crazy.
Do 1 million views.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't think sometimes even people understand how monstrous that is to be able to put that thing together. So there's a lot of moving parts, but I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in the fall.
Well, and we're now streaming live at OutKick.com for the first time. This past month, right?
Yeah. You can. I mean, if you're on the site, usually the second tab when you go to OutKick should always be that dynamic. So it's pretty great.
We also had our first ever Democrat on OutKick today with Heath Shuler on the show. So I joked. I said he may be the first Democrat to appear on OutKick. So
was he
I
a
love
Democrat?
OutKick.
I didn't even remember that he was a Democrat congressman.
Yeah, he was a blue dog Democrat.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure he's still a Democrat. But man, I know that. So when I was
he laughed when I said you're the first one to come on. So
when I was in 8th grade, I went to Rivergate Mall in Goodlettsville, Tennessee, to get Heath Shuler's autograph. So we're going to be with the Spire Group at the game, and they're one of the NIL collectives that's raising money, and
one of the best.
Yeah, they've done a really good job, and. It's just kind of wild to me. They brought Heath out to the house the first time I met those guys. And if you had told me when I was in 8th grade that, as a kid growing up watching Heath Shuler, who was one of the best college football quarterbacks ever in terms of – and he was kind of ahead of the curve, in terms of his ability to use his legs and also have a cannon for an arm. He was just a freak athlete. And I still wonder what would have been capable for him if he had come back for his senior year. But – he was he come in second in the Heisman Trophy voting, I think, that year.
Charlie Ward.
Yeah. And obviously Charlie Ward was a freakish player, too. That was a fun era of college football. But if he had come back for his senior year, and I do think Charlie Ward came back for his senior year, if I remember correctly, back in the early 90s, my knowledge.
93.
And he would have been one. I mean, he's iconic already. And his son is a walk-on, basically, on the team now. I think he wears number 21 as well. But it would have been really cool, I think, if he had been able to come back for his senior year. Because if you remember, that next year, Jerry Colquitt was supposed to take over, tore his ACL, first series basically against UCLA, and that's when Peyton Manning came in and that era started.
It's great you mentioned Jerry Colquitt because he said he was coming on OutKick 360, and Jerry Colquitt, his former backup and roommate, said that's my favorite show.
Yeah.
I was excited that Heath was coming on his favorite show. So Jerry Colquitt is a big OutKick fan. How about that?
I asked him about leaving early for the draft.
Yeah.
By the way, if you missed the interview, download the audio wherever you get your podcast. Two reasons why he went early. Number one, his parents were going to have to take out a second mortgage in order to pay the $2 million policy on an injury policy for him. And number two, he did not want to play for the expansion franchises that were coming in Carolina and Jacksonville.
Oh, that's interesting.
So he ends up in Washington.
Right, and then they had to gut Gus Frerotte head-to-head.
They were also a year removed from winning the Super Bowl.
When he went to the Washington.
92, they won the Super Bowl, right? And then the next year they were bad, and then they drafted third and got
the Redskins
Shuler.
have kind of, whatever they are now, the Washington, what are they?
Commanders.
They've fallen apart really since the early 90s and haven't been able to kind of have that sustained quarterback play of excellence. So, but it was something, I mean, when you're a kid growing up, to have Heath Shuler in your house is something that you certainly wouldn't anticipate. And I think a lot of times you just have to kind of pinch yourself that you get to go around to all these fabulous games and get to watch them in person. It's really pretty extraordinary.
Which game intrigues you the most over the opening weekend? There's several good matchups.
I think it's Utah-Florida.
Yeah, I agree.
Because Kyle Whittingham's got a heck of a team. They're the best team in the Pac-12. And as you break down what's likely to happen in that game, 2.5-point spread, you've got Anthony Richardson, who I think has elite first-round talent at the quarterback position. I mean, he's a dual playmaker. He's got a cannon for an arm. He's got to be more consistent, got to be more accurate. And we'll see what he's capable of with Billy Napier. I wondered, candidly, how he never was able to be the guy, because I think he had a different level.
Yeah.
He had a different level than what – and by the way, the fact that Dan Mullen got fired, I mean, if you had made that prediction in September of last year, remember, Florida took Bama to the wire.
One of the games of the year.
Down in Gainesville. And the idea that you would go and fall apart like they did, and that Dan Mullen would be on with – I think I saw him on with Dan Dakich this morning. Doing the Dakich show. That
a year later,
Dan Dakich just loves Florida football coaches between Urban Meyer and Dan Mullen.
That you would end up in a situation where we don't know what Billy Napier is going to be capable of. But I was just out in Utah, and they're fired up. I mean, this is as big of an opening game as they can ever imagine.
They're good,
but they were talking how much about they were nervous about the weather. Because it's been hot in Utah, but it hasn't been. Now they're getting to play at night, Saturday night, so it's not like you're there in the middle part of the sun. But I think there's a lot of uncertainty on both sides there. I picked Florida to win, but I also think Utah is a legitimate contender to be in the playoff this year. Because to me, I'm not bought into Clemson. Like, I don't believe that DJ Uiagalelei, I'm probably still mangling his pronunciation there.
Uiagalelei?
Yeah.
Uiagalelei. Right,
I think that might be
gone
right.
through this because
he's much closer.
It's like Tua Tagovailoa. I think it's Uiagalelei is how you pronounce it.
I think that's right. So, I believe
it's one I have not mastered.
Look, Clemson is losing their offensive and defensive coordinator. There's some questions out there about, hey, how much of the Clemson program's success was a function of getting Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson back to back, elite top 10 caliber quarterbacks, and now you lose your coordinators. They're on the road against Georgia Tech, 22.5-point favorite. I think that's going to be a game that is worth paying attention to. Georgia Tech in the fourth year of a coach who has not done very much so far. That's the kind of game where you need to have a performance.
You're saying watch out for that game?
I just think that Georgia Tech's going to cover.
Okay,
and I'm not convinced. Like, when you break it down, we know Georgia and Alabama are incredibly elite. We know Ohio State, I think, is elite. I think you would have to put those three teams on kind of a different caliber than anybody else right now. And then who is that sort of sneaky fourth team that could rise their way up? To me, Utah is maybe that team that has a little bit of a chance, given the consistency that Whittingham has shown there.
Well, in talking about that Utah-Florida game, another thing that intrigues me about it is it's not a neutral site game. I like the fact that it's played on a campus.
Yeah, well,
Utah at Florida is much better because it's not being played in Jerry's World.
For a long time, Florida would not travel outside of the South for any game. Now, to be fair to them, they play Florida State every year. They play 8 SEC games.
I think they only play in 3 states total this year.
Yeah.
Florida, Tennessee, and Kentucky, I think. They play at Kentucky?
No, they host Kentucky.
I've got this.
They host Kentucky
this
year.
But in general, they want those 3 home games otherwise, but they're starting to add that additional challenge. And I'm sure you guys saw the news that came out late last night, but the possibility of a 12-team playoff getting implemented sooner rather than later.
In like 2 weeks.
potentially by tomorrow. I think
by
they
tomorrow,
said
yeah.
they could vote for
by
it.
Friday, yeah.
And so you add in that as a big-time seismic shift in college football. And then certainly we await to see what the fallout's going to be of SC UCLA to the Big Ten. All these things I think are pretty intriguing to follow.
So they play in Florida will play football in 3 states: Florida, Tennessee, and Texas. Those are their 3 states.
So they play at A&M this year?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that Billy Napier is going to do pretty well, and he's starting to recruit solidly. But I think you got to get Florida now. So Tennessee obviously opens with Ball State. Next week, huge game against Pitt. And then win that one, and you're 3-0 with Florida coming to town. And I think Knoxville will be as electric for that game as it has been in a very, very long time.
And then Florida has Utah and Kentucky before they even come here.
Yeah. So Florida will be more tested. Obviously, Pitt plays today against West Virginia in what I like West Virginia plus a 7.5 in that game. But I think you start to break all of these Thursday night games. Everybody's excited to see exactly what they got.
Hit us up on Twitter at OutKick360. Coming up, we have 5 big questions to get us ready for the SEC season. Going into the schedules that kick off tonight, Clay sticks around for another big discussion. We'll go through all of the bets that he's made. He's already released them at OutKick.com, and we'll dive into why he feels like he's taking Purdue or Arkansas. I think you have them covering Cincinnati. We'll go a layer or 2 deeper here on Clay's bets, and we'll compare them to Withrow's parlay. I already know one. There's a big difference already.
Total opposite.
Okay.
That's the preview of it. It's going to be the total opposite.
Clay's going 11-0. We preview the SEC slate next on OutKick 360.
What's up, guys? It's Tommy, and if you missed my last show, you may be experiencing some FOMO, so this is what you missed.
It's insane to me that there's this, I don't know if it's stubbornness, pride, hubris, all of the above, that prevents people from just saying, upon further review, as we often hear in sports, we made a bad call and we can overturn this call. This is an embarrassment for the United States, as far as I'm concerned.
How are these people able to function day to day when they get this rabid and this shook over red hats? Red hats, good Lord. The left conveniently forgets that half and likely more of this country likes, voted, and would vote again for Donald Trump. Just because no one has ever thrown a Joe Biden-themed anything, other than maybe a funeral, doesn't mean liberals get free rein to shame the Sweeney family. It's like I talked about in the beginning of the show today. The left is anything but loving and tolerant. They project their hate, their intolerance, their racism, and their bitter BS on us because, quite frankly, they hate themselves, especially the white ones. So go throw a pity party or a justice riot or post a black square and get over yourselves because you're not that special. According to the LA Times, these A-listers, Sylvester Stallone, Dwayne Wade, Kevin Hart, Kim and Kourtney Kardashian were all cited along with 2,000 others for surpassing 150% of their monthly water budgets at least 4 times since the agency declared a drought emergency at the end of last year. Dwayne Wade being the worst offender, using nearly 500,000 gallons of water in the month of May alone. But don't worry, Wade and his woke wife Gabrielle Union have an explanation. They're having issues with their pool. I've got more hot takes every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday night, and I'll have some final thoughts at 7 p.m. Eastern right here on OutKick.com.
Hey, listen, if you missed my show, don't at me. I've got you covered. Take a look. Peter Doocy, Karine Jean-Pierre, the press secretary, the only press secretary. I want to be the press secretary to the President of the United States. Anybody that knows me knows this to be true. Let's hear this little exchange, if you don't mind.
How is it 2 different things? Somebody unvaccinated comes over on a plane. You say that's not okay. Somebody walks into Texas or Arizona unvaccinated. They're allowed to stay. Why?
But that's not how it works. Like we actually, no.
I know that that's not what you guys want to happen, but that is what is happening.
But that's not, it's not like somebody walks over and that's not how.
That's exactly what's happening. Thousands of people are walking in a day. Some of them turn themselves over. Some of them are caught. Tens of thousands a week are not. That is what is happening.
Now about you, but I want more pressure like that. I want more exposure like that. The queen of the border, Kamala Harris, hasn't even been to the border. I had fun last night watching Serena Williams. Did you happen to catch it? She was wearing diamond, and I don't know what this means. She was wearing diamond-encrusted shoes. She came out in a cape. You know my theory. If you see someone in a cape, follow them. A good time will ensue. I'm telling you. I say it all the time. So Serena comes out wearing all black, has a cape, and I don't know. I thought, well, in listening to John McEnroe before the match, this could be a tough match. The woman that she's playing, a lady named Danka Kovanic, was, according to John McEnroe, pretty mentally tough, and she was. 9 to 11 Eastern time at OutKick.com.
It's the college football kickoff special on OutKick 360. Clay Travis with us. Glad you're with us as well across the OutKick network, either watching or listening across the great radio partners that we have in 6 states. DraftKings.com and the DraftKings app is where you can go to take advantage of what we're going to get into with Clay a bit later this segment on some great picks tonight. Bet $5, get $200 instantly for all new DraftKings users. You've got to be 21 years or older, and this is for first-time DraftKings Sportsbook customers only. Make a deposit of at least $5 in your Sportsbook account, then place a wager of at least $5 on NFL or college football games between tonight and Week 2 of the NFL season on September 19th. And by doing that, you will receive $200 instantly in your DraftKings account, in addition to any winnings from your original wager once it settles. SEC, we've got Missouri and Tennessee tonight, and then we get into the heart of everything on Saturday. Let's start, Clay, with our look at the SEC this season at Texas A&M. You mentioned earlier Clemson, Utah, that fourth team.
Yeah.
While I think it's unlikely we see 3 teams from the SEC in the college football playoff, A&M has reached a point where it is a bit of put up or shut up time, right?
Yeah.
Is Jimbo Fisher going to back up the talk this year now that Haynes King is back? He's healthy. He's won the job. They've had all this buzz about recruiting. What are you expecting in College Station?
Well, I think you have to assess every team in the SEC West to kind of figure out where exactly Texas A&M fits in. Alabama is going to be elite. I don't think Auburn's going to be very good. LSU is going to be in the first year of Brian Kelly. I think it's unlikely that they are going to be spectacular. I think Arkansas is going to be really good. I think Ole Miss will take a step back. Mississippi State may be a little bit better than Ole Miss.
Ole Miss's schedule's easy, though. That's the thing. I
Starts
agree
out
with
tough,
you.
though, with Cincinnati at home. That's a challenge.
Arkansas, yeah. The Ole Miss's schedule is extremely beneficial for Lane and all the turnover that he's had.
Well, I think the SEC West is going to be down a little bit, kind of is my assessment.
Okay.
I think Alabama is going to be head and shoulders the best team in the SEC West. Not that LSU most years. I know that obviously the Joe Burrow year, they were incredible, but they haven't necessarily been able to run with Alabama at a high level. I certainly don't think they're going to be able to do it this year. I think Auburn is going to be very mediocre. And so I think Arkansas and A&M, whoever wins that early season Arkansas A&M game, which Arkansas had so much difficulty winning, they won it last year because Arkansas beat Texas and Texas A&M, which a lot of Arkansas people are still thumping their chests about. And we'll get an early read on Arkansas with Cincinnati coming to town. I like Arkansas to cover that game. You know that you're going to be pretty good on the offensive side of the ball, notwithstanding that you're losing Treylon Burks. I really like their offensive and defensive coordinators at Arkansas. Barry Odom is really good on the defensive side of the ball. And certainly Kendall Briles has, Miami came after him with everything they've got. He's a super young, talented guy that comes out of the Baylor system. Obviously, he's Art Briles' dad. And so I think Arkansas is going to be able to score. I think they'll be better defensively. So I think the second best team in the West is either going to be Arkansas or A&M.
And there's a stretch for A&M right around October, I think. Miami, Arkansas, Mississippi State. Now, I may have Mississippi, MSU and Arkansas flip-flop there. But that stretch determines what the heat level is on Jimbo Fisher, because Aggie Land is expecting, they're paying him top dollar to start to win.
It's also weird with Jimbo Fisher because he's an offensive guy, former quarterback coach, offensive coordinator. He's not really found the quarterback at A&M. Maybe it's Haynes King. Kellen Mond had a good season. But that's the weird part about it is with all the recruiting wins they've had and everything going on there, they can't bring in the quarterback.
That was Jimbo's calling card. Was that he was a great coach of quarterbacks, and that was what he had success with at Florida State. So the fact that he's gotten to Texas A&M, and I know they pulled off, we were down there, the monster win over Alabama last year, which was a monstrously validating program directional win, but it still didn't translate into a legitimate run at the SEC West title. And, if you start to break all this down, I just think that game, I believe it's in Dallas, unless I know they've talked about doing away with the neutral site game. But usually it's in Jerry World. It has been so far since A&M joined. And I think that whoever wins that game between A&M and Arkansas will be the second best team in the West.
Question number 2. Tell me if you guys agree with this. Florida is the new Tennessee, a program that's known for winning national championships or has won one recently in our, era, but yet has been struggling to get back to that type of class. Billy Napier kicking things off and trying to.
Look, they've been in the SEC championship game a bunch.
Well, they were there a year ago with Dan Mullen.
Yeah.
They're not even close to Tennessee territory.
In the SEC championship game since 2007, which is when Withrow and I met.
Well,
so
SEC championship
and we're old
versus,
now, and we've had an old friendship. So,
but the comparison is, I don't hear 10 wins for the first time since 2007. I hear 98.
But
that's the bar.
Here's the difference.
So,
Tennessee fans, here's why they're not going in Tennessee territory. Okay. Tennessee fans will be thrilled with 8 wins this year, okay, because of where they've been. Florida fans, if they win 8, they'd be asking, why do you not win 10 and beat Georgia and win the division? And a year from now, the expectation for Napier is win the division. That's the expectations of Florida.
They could be 1-3 in October.
Yeah, look, I think for Tennessee, Pittsburgh is a gravy game. And what I mean by that is, even if you beat Pittsburgh, if you come back home and lose to Florida, a lot of people are going to be very upset. Because what Tennessee has to be able to do, Tennessee gets judged by Tennessee fans on Florida, Georgia, Alabama. Alabama, the games by and large have not been close for 15 years. Georgia, they've actually had some success, relatively speaking, not great success.
Success relative to Georgia's overall success Tennessee's had. You're right.
And then Florida has been an unmitigated disaster. And Tennessee's lost to a lot of bad Florida teams.
They found a way to lose.
To teams that are not good.
Yep.
And so for a lot of people, I think what's going to go on is, regardless of what happens in Pittsburgh, the Florida game is going, and I would say the same thing about Florida with Utah. That's great. You beat Utah. It's a good debut for Billy Napier. But ultimately, Florida is going to want to beat Kentucky and Tennessee, right? So if they don't beat Kentucky and Tennessee, there's going to be a lot of nervousness. You're right. They could start 1-3. I mean, it's not an easy out-of-the-gate scenario. I just have seen Tennessee choke so many times.
Me too.
So many times against mediocre Florida Gator teams that I find it hard to believe that they're just going to come out and put it on Florida and whip them like they should.
Well, I think the big difference is the expectation level of Florida fans has yet to change. Tennessee fans have had to readjust their expectations around the program.
Well,
now, if Georgia continues on this pace, they're going to have to readjust their expectations and hope for second in the SEC East, just like what Tennessee and Kentucky are vying for this year.
Where I think you can analogize things is Florida has swung and missed a bunch on football hires, right? So
and Mullen was a layup. We all thought that.
Ron Zook replacing Spurrier was a mess, okay? They go get Urban Meyer. He solves everything. But then Will Muschamp comes in, and he was the most – he's a coach in waiting at Texas. Everybody in the country wanted Will Muschamp. He comes in, doesn't get it done. All right, well, you're sitting around, you're trying to figure out what the solution is, and you had that incredible sort of dynamic where Scott Frost, Dan Mullen was going to be Tennessee's coach until all of a sudden Chip Kelly decides to go out to UCLA, and Florida really felt like they were going to get Chip Kelly. And so if they had gotten Chip Kelly, then Dan Mullen would have been here, and it would have been intriguing to see what Dan Mullen did here. And again, up until October of last year, people were like, hey, Dan Mullen's done a pretty good job at Florida.
Yeah. You know what's crazy about that whole scenario? Florida reached out to Scott Frost initially for that job before Dan Mullen. Scott Frost would have been better off staying at UCF in hindsight.
Mullen was their third choice, but that's what set off the UT Greg Schiano implosion. Was Dan Mullen was all set to be here until Florida whiffed on Chip Kelly and Scott Frost.
Dan Mullen was a safety net for Tennessee until that happened.
And then the Scott Strickland, the AD at Florida, knew, obviously, Dan Mullen very well from Mississippi State and thought this is the ultimate safety valve. Now, Mike White appears to have done the same thing with Josh Heupel, right? He went out and tried to find a replacement.
And then went with what he knew.
Yeah, for Jeremy Pruitt, and went with a guy that he felt very confident about. Now, I would say that Heupel exceeded expectations in year one. Certainly, Hendon Hooker came out of nowhere to throw over 30 touchdown passes and only 3 picks. Nobody saw that happening. So I'm curious to see how much growth there will be with Hendon Hooker. Because is this a third question? What's going to happen in the East?
Well, the third question is more about Heupel, because I think in the same context.
It's a perfect segue, actually.
Is Heupel the real deal? And I think in the same manner that we're looking at Florida's September, he's got Pitt and Florida. And that, to me, signals where we are with Josh Heupel in the air at Tennessee.
Yeah, look, Tennessee could very easily, in fact, probably will be favored to be 4-0. That would be an incredible out-of-the-gate start, because then you go to LSU, if I'm not mistaken. You don't really know what to expect at LSU. That's a winnable game. There is, my kids watch the Marvel movies all the time, right? There's a multiverse where Tennessee is 5-0 with Alabama coming to town on October 15th. And I talked about how
Knoxville will burn.
Yeah,
when that happens.
I talked about how big the game against Florida would be at 3-0. But if you had Alabama coming to town with Tennessee 5-0, even with Tennessee 4-1, that's going to be a monstrous game. And given that Tennessee feels like they can score points, I'm not nervous about Josh Heupel on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
I question whether Tennessee is going to be able to get necessary defensive stops and whether they're much better defensively. The defensive performance against Purdue was one of the worst defensive performances that I have ever seen in a bowl game in my life. When you look at how many people Purdue had out, credit to Purdue. But there's no way whatever they hung, what did they score, 50?
48-45 was the final.
So there's no way that team, and Tennessee, I believe, was up 21-7 in that game, right?
Yeah.
And then fell apart. And I know it was a controversial ending.
It's a little bit ref-aided, but their defense was bad.
Really
but
bad.
Also, it's an offensive system that just hangs the defense out to dry.
Yeah, well,
it's part of the product, right?
Well, that's where Oregon got smart in the way that they would recruit is you got to have 2s and 3s who can play, because you're just playing so many snaps. And if you're only possessing the ball for 14 minutes in a game, 46 minutes on the other team, is going to lean on you, and which is why, on some level, I don't understand why they just don't go the same style on defense. Extremely high risk, high reward. Just try to get turnovers. Just blitz. Get your defense either off the field really fast because you gave up a big play, or get your defense off the field really fast because you were able to get a turnover and play that kind of high-stakes ball where it's a lot more like a basketball game effectively than it is a traditional football game.
For the sake of time, just give me your both initial reaction. So we're talking 4-0 start. If they go 2-2, what's the reaction to Josh Heupel in year 2?
You start to look down the rest of the schedule and see where they can get to a bowl game at that point, and it's going to get real nerve-wracking.
Yeah, it sounds repetitive
for Tennessee fans. I think I'm with Clay on this. The offense is fine. You know what you got with Josh Heupel's offense.
It's great. I mean,
it's going to be about recruiting, and it's going to be about can they play a defense that forces turnovers. I think they recovered only 3 fumbles a year ago, and they had 13 picks. They need a lot more than that. Like they have to be opportunistic and create turnovers.
I think just get stops. Can they get 3 more stops a game and get the ball back? You know, in many cases for that defense last year, if they just force a punt, that's a turnover.
Yeah.
Right? I think they need to be 3-1. You got to win either Pittsburgh or Florida. And the truth of the matter is there'll be a lot of pressure on that Florida game if they're sitting at 2-1. But if Tennessee were to beat Florida, that would be like a 7-win, almost just such a monstrous monkey off the bat kind of situation for Josh Heupel to beat one of the big 3. And
in year 2. It would make a season for a lot of Tennessee fans.
I think it would also – Tennessee's got pretty good momentum recruiting.
Yeah.
I think if they could get out and get a little bit of hype, right, get that win against Florida, beat Pitt. If you're 4-0 going to LSU, that's a big game. And then regardless of what you do at LSU, you're 4-1 coming back against Alabama. Those are big signature, everybody notices the games. To me, that's the play that makes a lot of sense.
4th question. Does Brian Harsin survive the season at Auburn?
Well, it's certainly ominous that they fired Alan Green, the AD there. You never want to be the guy who gets fired, who has the AD who hired you get fired, right? Because you're usually going to be protected by whoever hires you. And that, to me, seems like a potentially danger zone for him. Now, the other thing is there's so much money out there that whatever the buyouts are, they typically don't look that substantial.
It drops, though, around a certain time frame of the season, I think, for
Depends
Harsin.
I'm not sure when the Harsin. I know for Scott Frost, October 1st, it goes from 15 to 7.5.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken. So, look, that $7.5 million can make a big difference.
Yeah.
And so
I think they know he's gone, though, either way. Right?
Well, he doesn't seem happy.
You don't want him coaching
like
Alabama.
Well, if he does well, he'll bolt for an available job, and if he doesn't, he's going to get fired. I mean, it's that simple.
I think somebody's going to go after Urban Meyer.
Okay.
Like, it wouldn't shock me if Nebraska goes after Urban Meyer. It wouldn't shock me if Auburn went after Urban Meyer. I think somebody will kind of break the glass and be so desperate, especially Nebraska, because, I mean, they basically got their savior. It would be like if Peyton Manning came to Tennessee and then went, 4-8.
They got their fair-haired golden boy, and it didn't work out.
And if it doesn't work out there, like, who is it ever going to work out for? I feel bad for that fan base.
Finally, aside from Auburn, is there a job or jobs you feel like will be open in the SEC come December?
Well, that's kind of hard, right? I mean, a lot of these guys are relatively in new places.
First, second, third year.
Something's going on in Kentucky with Mark Stoops. So
I like where you're going here.
I could see him deciding to leave because of the feuding with John Calipari and what he perceives as a lack of respect for historically an incredible job at Kentucky.
But the university's giving him the respect. It's Cal that's not.
I get it.
Right?
But I could just see him. Look, right now I would say Tennessee, Florida, and Georgia are all moving in the right direction. I think South Carolina is too. I'm uncertain about Missouri. I have no real idea about Vanderbilt. But
LSU, first-year coach.
Yeah, in the East, to me, you look and, hey, we may be doing away with division soon, and breaking down East versus West may not matter. But I always think you have to figure out where you rank in your division as a first position. And I feel like Kentucky has peaked, and he may see an opportunity that's out there. FSU may open up. They're not happy with Mike Norvell. We just mentioned Nebraska may well be opening up. There's so many different directions that things could go that I could see Kentucky kind of making an intriguing move there.
All right, let's go to Clay Travis's locks at OutKick.com. Ohio State over Notre Dame. You're saying the Buckeyes cover, right?
Well, I have not even bet that game yet because the line's all the way up to 17 or 17.5, if I'm not mistaken. It's clearly the biggest brand game. I'm not sure that Notre Dame is ready this year to go toe-to-toe with Ohio State. So, but 17 is such a big number. I'm waiting to see where that one's going to go.
You're taking Florida over Utah.
I took Florida plus the points.
Okay. West Virginia to cover.
I like West Virginia plus 7.5.
Pitt.
Totally opposite. I think Pitt kills them. I think it's a 2-score Pitt win tonight.
Is it 36.5 tonight for Tennessee Ball State?
It was 35. I was just about to pull up the latest.
36.5.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was 35 earlier in the week, so it's continued to tick out.
You would take Tennessee to cover?
Yeah, I took Tennessee at 35. I think I'd take them at 36.
And the over?
And I took the over.
Purdue plus the points.
Purdue plus 3.5 at home against Penn State. I also took the over in that one.
Arkansas? Did you take Arkansas?
I like Arkansas minus the 6.5 against Cincinnati.
And I don't know how you picked Florida State LSU, but what are you doing Monday?
I took Florida State plus the points against LSU. 3.5. Florida State played a game. I know it was against Duquesne, I believe. Not exactly a class opponent. But I like the idea that they've played.
Yeah.
And when you factor in Brian Kelly, Mr. Southern gentleman extraordinaire, when you factor in his first game, I like the idea of Mike Norvell and FSU being a little bit more prepared.
My mom always made me great sweet tea.
He sounds either like
I love these Louisiana nights.
Family.
Me and my family love this cornbread.
He sounds either like Nicolas Cage from Con Air or Forrest Gump.
I've been holding back a sneeze for the last 20 minutes. Clemson, you say watch out for that. You say Georgia Tech.
I like Georgia Tech plus a 22.5.
Clay, thank you.
Yep.
Should I take us to break?
Go ahead. I'm about to sneeze. We're going to come back. We're going to give our picks for tonight and preview the upcoming slate and what we're doing tomorrow back in Nashville. And we're about to go meet Clay over at Neyland. So
yeah, it's going to be
all
fun.
All that to come.
And you can see me on Tucker Carlson tonight, theoretically. So
wearing this shirt.
We're wearing a T-shirt. Yeah, it should be fun.
Back with more on OutKick 360.
What's up, guys? It's Tommy, and if you missed my last show, you may be experiencing some FOMO, so this is what you missed. Over the weekend, I don't know if you saw, but there was a big dust-up, a big debacle involving the wife of Jason Aldean, Brittany Aldean, who she posted a little video saying that she's glad her parents didn't change her gender when she went through a tomboy phase because she loves being a girly girl. Yeah, was it a little bit, pointed? Yeah, it certainly was. But there were a couple other country artists, Cassidy Pope, Maren Morris, and a few others that were very, very triggered by her statement. And they didn't take the advice of Michelle Obama. They did not go high. They went lower than low, calling Brittany Aldean Insurrection Barbie, saying she's disgusting. Did you see all this, and what were your initial thoughts when you saw it go down?
Oh, yeah. I saw that taking place in real time. And I think it's really funny that all of these straight people try and speak for us. First of all, we're not a monolith. Second of all, mutilizing children and medicalizing them and performing permanent procedures on them is not transphobic. That's called being a good person, a sane person.
All right, we all know the madness of the COVID era. Some are really excited to keep bringing back COVID at every turn as often as they possibly can. But Aaron Rodgers pretty much set it up there, saying this was a ridiculous policy. More athletes should have called it out. But what are your thoughts on him saying that, and especially to someone like a Joe Rogan? Is that going to move the needle at all?
I think it is. Look, Aaron Rodgers has always been outspoken. As you said, he's different. He's different in that he's unafraid.
I've got more hot takes every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday night, and I'll have some final thoughts at 7 p.m. Eastern right here on OutKick.com.
Hey, listen, if you missed my show, don't at me. I've got you covered. Take a look. He said, the word in tennis is Serena Williams kind of moved on from tennis. She's moved on to family. She's moved on to her businesses. She's moved on. She's 40 years old. What are you going to do, right? We move on. But here's the deal. I thought early, I didn't think she looked necessarily nervous. I just didn't think she looked very good. Then all of a sudden, boom, Chrissy Everett. And McEnroe called it the most dangerous weapon in the history of women's sports. Her serve got going, and her toughness was on display. And that's what I've always thought about Serena Williams. See, I have a weird thing that I love Serena Williams and I love Lamar Jackson because I think their toughness is off the charts. Like when Serena Williams gets down, you never think she's going to give in. Tennis is a lot about giving in. If you've ever played tennis, you know at some point you got to make a decision. Do I really want to keep fighting this? Or anyway, Serena Williams has never given in. In fact, her emotional outbursts are why I like her even more. I didn't like the fact that she was going to kill the umpire, but we all say things. I certainly said things on the sideline that if they were broadcast wouldn't put me in a very good light, but I've always liked her toughness. And last night I just simply had fun. I thought Marcus Freeman looked as lost as anybody I've ever seen coach a football, basketball, baseball, any game. And I'm listening to Holly Rowe just now, and all she's talking about is motivation. Because when people have no idea what they're talking about, that's what they talk about, motivation. My motivation. You can motivate until you're blue in the face, but what you realize with motivation is motivation doesn't work. Motivation is something when you have nothing to say, you talk about after. The bottom line is you got to figure out Travion Henderson, C.J. Stroud, those wide receivers, and a very fast defense. I don't think Notre Dame has it. 9 to 11 Eastern time at OutKick.com.
Old City Sports Bar. It's been a great host for us today and every time we're here in Knoxville with Spire Sports Group and the great partners we have here in Knoxville. We appreciate all of that and everyone watching today on the college football kickoff preview for OutKick 360. It continues tomorrow as we go into the weekend slate of games. Tonight, Chad, Oklahoma State, Central Michigan. kicks off at 7 o'clock Eastern.
Let me start with this, though, about Old City Sports Bar.
Yeah. Oh,
so
sorry. Yeah.
A lot of the crowd here headed to the game right now. Earlier, big thanks to Spire Sports Group. Had some of the Lady Vols out here, some other athletes on campus.
Golf.
Took a huge picture that I've posted on my Twitter account. A young lady for the Lady Vols decided to stand right in front of me and was my height. And I said, "Are you trying to big-time me here?" And she said no. So she stood to the side, put her arms around each other. The two Lady Vol teammates did the kneel in front of everyone else. It's a really good picture, but in all seriousness, thanks to Spire Sports, thanks to Old City Sports Bar, thanks to Aaron, the owner, thanks to Malia, who does a great job here as the manager at Old City Sports Bar. Every time we've been here, great spot. We're going to be heading from here to Neyland Stadium, Hutton, but this is a great launching point to Neyland.
It's a trampoline.
Yes.
It's a bounce. It's a launch, as you said. Tomorrow, we are back in Nashville at 6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. We'll be outside having a tailgate-like atmosphere going into the Saturday slate of games. Tonight, though, we have the Backyard Brawl, Pitt in West Virginia. The Pitt Panthers favored by 6.5 last I checked at DraftKings. It's a 127-year-old rivalry, and they play for the first time in 11 years. With Slovis compared to Pickett. Pickett rushed for about 400 yards on scrambles last year. What would you guess Slovis rushed for at USC?
125.
According to my iPhone without internet this morning.
Yep.
8 for 54.
Wow.
8 for 54. That is a drastic change in style, although the production could be a very similar based on the wide receiver play that they have.
You want to give me
even though Jordan Addison's gone.
Let me give you the biggest reason I'm worried about Pitt. I bet Pitt to cover. I had it 7.5. I'm worried about the loss of Mark Whipple as offensive coordinator. I think he was a huge part in Kenny Pickett's success, in Jordan Addison's success. They're talented guys, but he had a big hand in that. He went to Nebraska. I'm curious what happens with Pitt now with the new offensive coordinator. That's a big factor in this game tonight.
Jordan Addison, one of the best, if not the best wide receiver in the country now at USC. He had 33 plays of 20 yards or more last year. That led the country. The 3 returning wide receivers for Pitt had a combination of 29. So
it's a huge difference. You know what it comes down to, Hutton? What I believe in and what I don't believe in. I believe in what I saw from Keaton Slovis.
Yeah.
I don't believe in JT Daniels. I don't believe in what I saw at USC. I don't believe in what I saw at Georgia, given what we saw from Stetson Bennett when he took over. I think Slovis gets it done. I love Kalijah Clancy coming back for Pitt. I like Jared Wayne's a really good big receiver, behind Jordan Addison, number 2 receiver a year ago. He's the number 1 receiver now. I think all told, Pitt's got a lot more coming back than people realize.
Penn State, Purdue.
All 5 starting offensive linemen, too, by the way, for Pitt coming back.
Penn State, Purdue. Let's transition to Sean Clifford against Aiden O'Connell, 2 sixth-year quarterbacks. And Penn State has won this matchup 8 straight times. I mentioned earlier, first time since 2019. They played tonight. You like Purdue in this matchup?
I do. I like Aiden O'Connell over Sean Clifford. First off, I think he's just a better quarterback. Jeff Brom at home has been really good. I think that Purdue's going to be more creative. What concerns me about this game is Penn State is better on defense. Purdue can't run the football. So when you get one-dimensional, I think that could lead to some problems for Purdue in this game. But I like the offensive ingenuity of Jeff Brom, Aiden O'Connell coming back. I think Purdue wins a very close game. I think Penn State's got more talent, and they've got the better defense. But I've got a hunch that Purdue's going to figure out a way to get it done at home.
I want to see what Charlie Jones does as the transfer now at Purdue. He's joining Payne Durham, who's back at the wide receiver spot. Of course, O'Connell's a solid quarterback.
Payne Durham's a great tight end for Purdue, a big-time pass-catching option.
They can they'll throw the football. They can put up points. This should be a really good game tonight. Kicks off at 7 o'clock. We are back in Nashville tomorrow at 6th and Peabody. We'll be recapping the games tonight, but also looking forward to the national slate. Week 1 is here. Enjoy it. enjoy the college football kickoff. And
look, this is a celebration. We made it.
doubt.
College football is here. We're going to have the NFL next weekend. It's all right here. It's upon us. We have entered Knoxville. You have entered the college football season, and that's all that matters.
Huge thanks to Heath Shuler for joining us today. Brad Lampley, who joined us on site here at Old City Sports Bar. Trey Wallace, who swung by before heading to Neyland for his SEC coverage at OutKick.com. Paul and Blake Bedingfield with a great conversation. And if you missed, you can go back wherever you download your audio for your podcast. Just search OutKick 360. Clay Travis, who is waiting on us out front. As soon as we wrap, we're headed to college football. We're headed to Neyland. Here we go.
It's time. Let's bank some hats.
Back at it tomorrow at 6th and Peabody for OutKick 360 across the OutKick network.